Unscathed, written and narrated by Anatol Barsukov. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Chapter 1. The Crash. Men argue that emotional pain is always more profound than physical pain, until they are forced to endure it. Amir's eyes glanced lazily at his chair-bound victim. A small flicker from a nearby candle illuminated the sleep-deprived countenance of the prisoner that, after much planning, managed to silently capture his regular visitor. But similar to that of a novice interrogator, his eyes failed to simulate threatening malice, for he intended on gathering information rather than causing pain. "I am happy to see that you are finally awake, uncle. If you had rested any longer, I wouldn't have had sufficient time to talk before the guards became suspicious," he whispered in a weary tone. A few muffled cries escaped a gag in Owen's mouth. His lengthy gray hair and plump, elderly face were obscured by the tight cloth wrapped around his mouth. Rugged cloth pressed tightly against his chest and arms, creating bulges in his lavish red court suit. A small piece of cloth wrapped his feet under the posh wooden chair he resided in. The light of a lone candle cast a warm blanket of dim glow on the old yet surprisingly clean room that was made livable by a small wooden table, 2 chairs, a small bed, and a 3-tier cupboard. Amir took a step forward, towering over his captive. Dark, greasy hair lapped against his crude, dirty beard with every vile breath. A pair of bright hazel eyes shined from beneath the grotesque streaming mane that almost reached down to below his neck. Owen lifted his old green eyes timidly and immediately glanced back to the floor, breathing faster with every passing second. His long, gray eyebrows caught a few drops of sweat rolling down from his brow. Amir pulled a curved dagger out of the fold in his old and wrinkly nightgown that seemed to have once had a blue color, but was now faded and almost brown. The blade slid gently against the silk like a serpent through moss and pointed at Owen. "My plan would be negated if you failed to bring this. I was betting everything on you, uncle." He pressed the cold blade against Owen's throat, causing a light tremble. "You helped me, uncle, when all others refused. I will not kill you, nor will I hurt you, as long as you do exactly as I say." A strong hint of resolve cut through the weariness in his voice. "Now, I will untie the cloth around your mouth, and you will spit out the rest. Once you are able to speak, you will not scream. You will not shout for help. What I request from you is to tell me exactly what happened on that night, and tell it from the beginning. Make sure to talk loudly so the guards can hear your voice. Are we clear?" The knife retracted as the head began nodding. "Splendid," Amir said softly with a smile, his air of madness dictating all his movements. The blade raised and dug under the cloth pressed tightly around Owen's cheek. With a quick slice, the cloth popped and fell to the floor along with a clump of wet burlap. "Begin," he uttered as his mind began recalling and painting the memory that Owen recited before him. The memory he alluded to was from years ago. The sun began to set on the massive, castle-like manor of the Farsend family. The Lingering Flame was the name given to the manor that stood in the middle of La Faronne, the capital of Marinus. It stood for almost 3 centuries, marking the birth of the Farsend dynasty. A long line of Farsends ruled over Baroness, and the citizens were content with living there. Over the past decades, former citizens of a southern country called Silesia have been moving to Marinus due to a decline in their economy. The Silesians had a slightly darker skin complexion than the Marinians, and usually had blonde or brown hair. Marinians and Silesians were never mortal enemies. However, they were never fond of each other either. The Silesians were passionate and candid people while the Meridians were tame, elegant, and most of all, prideful. When the last rays of light escaped into the horizon, the 5 members of royalty met in the front of the manor. Prince Amir Farsend, the younger brother, his Senesian wife, Catherine, his father, John, his uncle, Owen, and his older brother and heir to the throne, Destrian. Amir, a man of only 21, wore a black velvet waistcoat. His short hair was parted and elegant. John and Owen both wore similar brown leather greatcoats that made their black trousers seldom seen. Destrian, who was only 2 years older than Amir, was dressed in a long greatcoat, which was parted in the back and embroidered with golden roses along each edge that gave it a most superfluous air. Catherine, the youngest of them all, at 19, wore a smooth, white damask dress that showed an array of almost palpable flowers that flowed down to her feet. After a moment, the party entered a lavish, elongated wagon pulled by 6 horses. 6 wheels, a set of 4 in the rear and 2 in the front, all interconnected by a turning mechanism, kept up the monstrosity, which was topped with ornate wooden swirls that spiraled up at each edge. "Your Highness," said audibly the elderly coachman in a fancy black suit as he plucked the handle of the door and swung it open. "Thank you, Michael," John replied, with a warm smile as he entered the carriage. "My pleasure, Your Highness," he said, giving an informal bow while still holding the door. The group followed behind, entering the carriage, and took their place on the black leather seats which wrapped around a rectangular table decorated with a few lit candles and a large plate in the middle. The table was bolted to the floor, and the plate was connected to the table by a bolt in the middle. Red silk drapes hung loosely over the windows around them, and a ceiling of red button velvet made the interior more sumptuous. "Now, let us finish our previous contention," John exclaimed as he shot a demanding glance at Amir. John was about as large as Destrian, but slightly plump. His age was a few over Owen, but he seemed much younger. The short, brown, and gray hair spiked up like a patch of grass, accompanied by 2 thick, diagonal eyebrows that gave John a perpetually contemptuous look, despite his warm-hearted nature. The horses outside neighed and began to push the carriage across the rocky road. Allow me to repeat my previous statement. Destrian is the future king of Marinus, due to Owen's decision to disinherit the possible next place on the throne. I intend to grant Destrian as much power as I can to sharpen his skills to lead. Fortunately, I am a father of 2 gentlemen that I am proud to call my sons. Therefore, I intend to grant power to both of you. However, I am at a crossroad. Destrian let out a light snicker and spoke up. "Then simply take the correct path, father," he said with a smug smile. His long black hair streamed over his fair, smooth face when he flicked it back with his hand and leaned forward, retaining the pompous air. John ignored the sarcastic jest and continued. "Both of you will have a say in what goes on in this country, but your intentions are very contradictory. We will need to agree on a path to take. I will listen to both propositions and make the decision myself. Amir, your fondness of the Senesians is on an almost disturbing level. I intend not offend your beliefs by saying this, but it seems that you have completely forsaken your people. The Senesians have done much to lose the trust of Marinus. And you intend to merge the 2 countries? This is no way to act as a proud Marinian leader. I pray that we may devise a plan that satisfies both hopes, yes?" Amir sniffled and leaned back in his seat with an irritated frown. "A stale request, father. If your constant, repetitive concerns took form, the wheels of our carriage would shatter and our plans to arrive at Torte would be soiled." "Save your pretentious metaphors, Amir," Destrian spouted instantly with a vile tone. "Your ideas are worse than your attitude. Just answer him, you crass mule." Owen put on an awkward smile to break the tension and spoke up. I don't believe that statement could be considered a metaphor. Silence! Roared John, effectively silencing his brother. Destrian, you will allow your brother to speak his mind. I will see your temper chiseled before your ascension into kinghood. Destrian rolled his eyes and gave Owen a distasteful glare, only to be mocked by a slight shrug. Emir, Catherine said dubiously, her wavy brown hair now separated and placed over her shoulders. You should perhaps tell him your plan. Emir looked around and took a deep breath. Fine. It may be of benefit to share my ideas. As we already know, I wish to accept the Senesians with open arms and fuse the two cultures. However, instead of assimilating the people naturally, I'm planning to force assimilate the Meridians into the beliefs and values of the Senesians. First, to delete prejudice, and worry not, for this law will be repealed when I feel necessary. We must impose a law that makes the punishment for crimes against Senesians 50% harsher. Second, What? Destrian cried in profound fury as he shot forward to the edge of his seat, pounding his fist on the table and causing the candles to dance wildly. Their smoke was quickly expelled by a light gust of wind that entered through the slightly open windows. Are you insane? If your twisted mind is so fond of the Senesians, why don't you simply move to Senesia and live out your wretched life with those wretched people? Meridians want nothing to do with the Senesians, let alone see this kind of discrimination. John frowned, clearly disheartened. I'm afraid Destrian is correct. This is discrimination against your own people. As much as I would like to respect your ideals, this is too far. Emir, Owen spoke up once more, this time to speak his mind rather than jape. I understand your ideals, but this is truly too far. You've lost the respect of your people, and in turn they will lose respect for you. Emir shot a grimacing glance at Owen. I don't need their respect. The Meridians are self-absorbed people whose happiness only sprouts from the seeds of vanity and greed. The Senesians are humble, giving people that want nothing more than to show kindness for their fellow man. And where has that brought them? Barked Destrian. Political instability and economic collapse. I think we may be able to work something out, said John with a nervous, paternal smile that a father assumes when his child is weeping from distress. Why? Roared Destrian. Why must you act with such acceptance to this traitor? Because he is family. Because I am a proud Meridian, and this is how we are. We are accepting people. We do not discriminate. He may not see us Meridians as this, but I am the king, and I intend to be the example all should follow. The heroic statement ushered a moment of silence. It's one thing to set an example, but this practically dispels that notion. He's a traitor to our people, and he should be punished for it, not praised and aided. Why can't you see that granting him power is a complete detriment to Marinus? You should not only deny his petty requests, but you should exile him from the country for his arrogance. Destrian, John shouted, far more angered by that comment than Emir's ridiculous proposition. You will never speak like that about your brother. He is your... No! You will not treat me like a child. I'm the future king, and I intend to do what benefits the country, not aid some brat that barks malicious orders and works adversely with our homeland. If you do not swallow your pride as king for once and do what's right... Des, there's nothing you can do or say to change my mind and justify your constant approval of his behavior. And your plan? Emir asked with an audacious air. Do nothing? And to what end will you intend to keep this rotting stasis? Some great leader you will become. Destrian assumed an equally bold air. Sometimes allowing nature to run its course is the correct plan. Forced assimilation can never work, let alone to that degree. Our family struggles from constant accusations of treachery because of you. Our grip on the country is slowly loosening because of you. No amount of money or supplies can benefit this country as much as your disappearance. And if it were up to me, I would have had you exiled or executed long ago. Only thing keeping you here is your magnanimous father." An awkward silence fell over the cabin. The rumble of wheels on stone took the place of voices, but failed to resolve the situation. John looked down, unable to conjure an appropriate sentence to break the tension. Owen's eyes darted back and forth between two brothers that stared daggers at each other, unblinking. Amir paid no mind to Catherine's nervous expression, even after she nudged his arm softly. "And once I am king, I intend to do exactly that. And there is nothing Father can do to deter that." John opened his mouth to speak, but Amir raised his palm. "No, Father, I do not need your protection or words of wisdom. I am able to solve problems on my own." His voice was unpleasantly calm for Destrian to hear. "What will you do? Run?" "I do not flee from my problems. There is only one answer here, brother. If this is what I can look forward to after you become king, then there is only one way to change things. An official duel. A duel for the future kinghood. If I win, I will be king after father, and allow you to live your life in this country as a prince. And if you win, I will be exiled to Sinesia." Destrian let out a booming laugh and grinned. "If this is what you wish, oh, how comical, how grand! Then so be it, my poor arrogant brother. Suppose this request attests your slow plummet into insanity. We have sparred countless times over our lives, and you have never been victor. Unless you have gained a tremendous amount of experience since our last spar a few months ago, I think you should purchase a train ticket to Sinesia now." The two exchanged a couple of angry glances when John drew a loud and interrupting breath. "I cannot express how disheartened I am to hear this. Now I have to ask, is there a way I can make you reconsider that proposition, Amir? We may yet come to some sort of agreement." "No," he replied immediately, with nothing but resolve in his voice. "Destrian, you have always been my least favorite person in the family. And there is a thing you should know. One day, your pride will strangle you as your arrogance stabs you in the back. And when your values betray you, I will be there to take your place." Destrian let out a soft giggle and ran his hand through his hair, poorly concealing his excitement. "You have always been a man of words and no action. The only reason you have survived this long is due to your father's protection. And now it seems that you're stepping right out of it. We will fight. I will show you what the real world does to malignant deviants like you." The words spit like poison, and in an instant the memory faded. A light flicker of a candle caused Amir's shadow to dance on the door as he scratched his thick, untended beard and made his way around the tied-up uncle. Yes, Amir whispered softly. "I remember it all now." And as he finished that sentence, it happened. "Yes," said Owen audibly. "Immediately after that sentence, the cavern suddenly exploded. I woke up beside you and your wife on the damp ground, covered in blood, my head throbbing and spinning. I stood up to see the bank of Cristo River flowing beside me. I saw your father's body on shore, massive shard of wood sticking out of his chest. I tried to make my way towards him, but the water swept his body away. Everything was still a blur when I turned, but when I turned to see your brother, standing before me completely unscathed, I'm arrogant of the apparition that may have cloaked him into safety, the inconceivable stroke of luck that may have bestowed itself upon him, but somehow he suffered no injuries. No scrapes or scratches. It was as if he walked out of the carriage before the crash even occurred." Amir shuddered in surprise. My eyes adjusted a bit more, and I could see the broken remains of 2 carriages. There was a pungent scent of alcohol coming from the body of an unknown man lying next to a few broken bottles. I believe he was the one that hit us. There were 2 dead horses. I think the rest ran. I looked to my right to see you and Catherine lying on the ground unconscious. You looked much more hurt. Destrian walked over and swung you over his shoulder. He whispered something to me, but I cannot recall what it was. I reached down to pick up Catherine, but he told me to just follow him. Silently we crept through the darkness, taking turns carrying you. Destrian did not follow the road. He took me through the forest. It was clear he didn't want to be seen. I tried to talk, but he refused to respond. All he would do was raise a finger and shush me. When we got to the manor, he told me to order the guards to walk me to Dr. Prinwick's room. I suppose that he snuck while they were gone. Placed you in a room, stationed 2 of his most trusted guards outside your door. I see. This is how I imagined it occurred. But how was he not hurt? And Catherine? Like I have told you, she was fine. A few bumps and scratches. After Destrian announced your and your father's deaths, she grieved and went back to Sinesia. No one has a clue where she currently lives. See, Amir, everything is fine. There's no reason to retaliate. Even if everything goes your way, you will never find Catherine. The words came out more abrasive than he expected. Amir let out a light snicker. Has age rendered your mind inept? Do you think that love is still what I desire after all this? After he took my life from me, after he put me through unimaginable pain, all that I have dreamed of was tearing him limb from limb. All I can think about is the splendid ways I can make him feel like I have. But first, he shot up his finger and darted to the floor cabinet. A loud click and the cabinet door opened, and he pulled out a full outfit out of a pile of clothes that increased in size with every visit from his uncle. It was a white undershirt, white cravat, a small crimson waistcoat, and formal black trousers. He tossed it on the bed and pulled out a small black jar and a pair of black leather boots. But first, he continued, I cannot be seen in this vile form. Keep talking. Tell me what happened next. Owen began to speak as Amir began cutting the hair and beard with the dagger. Owen explained that after Amir was deemed deceased, the country began to stabilize. Marinian and Senesian relations became decreasingly volatile, and the Senesians finally assimilated. He went silent for a bit as Amir used the knife to slice his hair into a good short shape and cleanly cut off the entirety of his beard. And what would revenge do? Owen asked suddenly. Killing him won't solve anything. All it will do is put the country into an uproar. If you recall, I told you a month ago that next month you will be taken overseas to the New World to live your life. Destrian does not wish to kill you, and this is the way that he allows you to live your life to the fullest. You must wait. Just wait a little bit longer and you will be free in a different world. The plea hit Amir like a tomato on a brick wall. Were you not listening? Amir asked with a calm and almost joyful tone. I have not the slightest intention to stray from my path of revenge. I wish to see Destrian suffer. I wish to watch him die in front of me by my hand. It is no intention of mine to go overseas. They will not grant me a full life. I will be a lackey, a slave for some settlement without a chance to return. I apologize if it may seem selfish, but I do not wish to live as a slave. And what will you do if you win? Attempt to become king? I haven't had the urge to think about the future. I have a task at hand, and once it is fulfilled, I will do as I please. Owen was unable to conjure any supplementary argument, and simply sat pondering as Amir washed his hair and face in the grimy sink in the corner of the room next to an equally grimy toilet. A few silent moments passed as he dressed up in an elegant outfit. From a rugged prisoner to a suave aristocrat, Amir tugged at his collar, and a clean grin stretched across his face. And off we go, he whispered. Those guards are on my revenge list as well. Wren and McGill always despised me ever since I was young. I knew who they were. They worked as interrogators for Aranesia before they saved John from an assassination attempt. He was so grateful that he asked them to become part of the Royal Army, and after years of trust, he offered them a position in the Royal Guards. Even after leaving their old profession, they still had urges to continue their past activities. When I woke here, I was already in unimaginable pain. I suppose Destrian picked those two as his most trusted, and therefore made them my turnkeys. He told them that they could do as they pleased, and so they did. Even after my wounds healed, and I would feel the pain subside, those two would enter and begin, again and again. They used countless torture techniques, ancient and contemporary, as long as it did not impair me or scar me. I was injected with weak poisons that caused my body to feel on fire. They forced me to drink serums that made my insides twist and writhe, and every time they did, they would inject me with something that kept me from fainting and only amplified the pain. This went on for so long, 4 years until I became used to the pain, as if it were there ever since I was born. They did this until I stopped reacting. There came a point where anything they used against me failed to even cause the lightest change in my breath, or even cause my arms to quiver. I became immune, and they left me be. It took 4 of the past 5 years to build up this immunity, and I intend to repay them for their efforts. He stepped forward and sliced a cloth that bound Owen to his chair. You're not planning to kill them, are you? Asked Owen, trembling. Amir let out a light chuckle. You are naive, Uncle. This world is not peaceful. Peace is obsolete. The best and most effective victory only follows the taking of life. Even the vilest scruples became clear answers at that point. Now, nothing detains us here. Let us leave. He poked Owen's back with his knife, causing him to pop up and walk to the door. Are you certain that this is the right path? He asked, hand on the doorknob. Amir nodded impatiently and waved his knife. So be it. The door let out a loud click and squealed open. A step forward, and the two entered a small antechamber, which was about 10 feet wide and 15 feet long, and led to another door, which was lit up by a candle mounted on the wall to the left. The wooden door had a small closed slit at eye level that leaked some light from the outside. Amir stepped in and closed the door behind him. But just before Owen went to knock on the next door, Amir took a step in front of him and blew out the candle, and then pressed his back against the part of the wall between the door and the corner, giving Owen a light nod. All finished, Owen shouted, giving the door a couple of knocks. A moment passed, and the slit opened. Took you long enough, a rough voice boomed from behind the door. Why is it dark? My apologies, Wren. I scratched my head, and the breeze from my arm put out the candle. Wren paused for a moment, as his eyes adjusted to the darkness in the room. From his angle, he was still unable to see Amir. You lock the door? Yes, of course, responded Owen with a smile. Good. Can't be too careful with an insane bastard like him, sulking in that room, probably thinking of all the ways he could kill us. The door clicked and opened inward, placing Amir in a small triangle. Destrian should have just ordered me to kill him. This waste of life shouldn't be alive. He groaned angrily. Don't say that, Wren. All human life is precious, said Owen as he took a step back, allowing Wren to walk past him with a lantern and a long match. Wren was a fairly tall, burly man with short dark hair and a thick mustache. He wore a white, long-sleeved burlap shirt dotted with a few colorful stains, and brown cloth pants that hung loosely around his brown belt, which held a long sheathed sword and keychain. You have always been soft, Owen. In a way, I envy it. The world needs more people like you. He lit the match with his lantern and walked to the candle. After a moment, he rubbed the match against the smoking wick. And maybe you're right. Maybe life should be treated as His voice stopped as a hand covered his mouth tightly. Silence fell over the room, and all became still. Even the fire from the candle and lantern no longer flickered. Ren looked down with bulging eyes to see a clutched hand pressed against his chest. Blood began to slowly ooze from under the pinky. "This is revenge," a voice whispered in his ear as the knife shot out of his chest, splattering a thin line of blood across the old and faded beige wall. Like an artist that had just finished his painting, Amir grinned at his masterpiece as he lowered the now lifeless body, when suddenly the lantern slipped out of his hand and hit the marble floor, shattering with a loud clank. Owen stared down in horror as Amir unsheathed the sword from Ren's belt. "Wake up, thirsty beast. Neglected. You were never permitted to drink the blood you were meant to spill," he whispered as he wiped the dagger on Ren's shirt and placed it into his left hand, while the right gripped the sword loosely. "Ren, if that was my new lantern I heard break, I'll break your neck," another rough but drier voice echoed from down the hall. Amir placed the dagger under his nose and let out a faint hush. Owen stood frozen while Amir pulled him behind the body and behind the door. "Ren?" the voice echoed once more. Amir could hear the sword unsheath and the tapping of boots on marble. The tapping drew closer until Amir could see the blade of a sword through the crack in the door between the hinges. "Owen?" he shouted as he saw the king's uncle kneeling over his dead friend. "What is this? What happened?" His voice was now equally frantic and furious. The candle flickered as he entered the room and paused in front of the door. Suddenly, with a loud crack, the wood of the door split and a blade flew past Amir's face, barely slicing through some skin of his cheekbone. Without allowing time for the sword to withdraw, Amir kicked down the door and knocked McGill against the wall. The breeze from the door smothered the fire of the flickering candle and shrouded the room in darkness. The sudden darkness disoriented Amir. When the door shut, he dashed forward with a sword. A loud clash of metal on stone shot a wave of shrapnel into the darkness. The door flung open and McGill dashed out, grabbing his sword on the way. Amir followed close behind. The two stopped and faced each other just outside the door, in the middle of a well-lit hallway of doors that stretched nearly 100 feet from the wall to staircase. "Well, go on, McGill. Call for backup. I'll kill every single guard in this damn place if I have to." McGill straightened his back and pointed his sword forward. He was slightly shorter than Ren, but he was no less threatening. A canopy of spiked black hair sat above a set of sharp eyebrows and long, curved nose that ended in a point. The face reminded Amir of Destrian. McGill's attire mirrored that of Ren, except for a pair of black leather boots, like Amir's, that stood against the floor. Amir could see muscle bulging from the tightly fit shirt. It seemed that McGill never neglected his training, even for being a middle-aged man. A sudden surge of resolve filled his eyes. "Even if anyone could hear me from here, I wouldn't dare ask for help. I've been waiting to kill you for so long. Death by many soldiers is too lenient of a punishment for a twisted and demented piece of trash. It might make you feel pride. Ren deserved an honorable death. I will not forgive you for this. I've been trained in combat all my life. There is no way that a third-rate fighter like you could beat me. I've seen you spar with Destrian. You're nothing special." Amir responded with a wide grin. "A slave to your own ignorance. Allow me to enlighten you, worm," he cried as the sword shot forward, shining brilliantly in the light of the hanging lanterns around him. Despite his size, McGill danced to the side like a nimble fox, dodging the attack. Amir kept his momentum and sliced to the right. McGill ducked and swung at the abdomen. The dagger Amir held in the left hand snuck under his arm and blocked the attack with a loud metallic clank that echoed down the hallway. Immediately after the impact, McGill clenched his fist and pushed forward with a loud grunt. The thump of flesh that came from the side of Amir's abdomen was loud enough to rival the preceding metallic clank and sent him reeling backwards. After catching his balance, he stood straight, arms at his sides. McGill opened and closed his hand, stretching the tendons with a smile. "Well, I'll be damned. I felt some muscle there. It seems that reading books wasn't the only thing you were doing. And your speed has increased as well. Perhaps this fight might turn out rather interesting." "You catch on quickly for a bullheaded mongrel." McGill opened his mouth to speak, but Amir dashed forward with an overhand strike. McGill blocked the attack, but shook under the impact. The blades grinded as Amir pressed his dagger against the blade for more force, but McGill did not budge. Suddenly, Amir jumped back and attacked from the side with all his strength. Another block followed, but this hit had much more force. The strike caused McGill to lose his balance and reel back. After a brief moment of silence, the two dashed at each other. McGill grabbed the lower part of the grip with the other hand and began swinging with more power. Each let out a flurry of strong attacks. The swords clashed and bounced again and again, like two fighting cobras, until both duelists retreated for a moment of respite. While attempting to catch his breath, McGill let out a soft chuckle. "It seems that you were sandbagging before." Amir was no less exhausted from the clash. "Likewise," he responded. McGill's breath began to slow down until it normalized. "I was once a proud, renowned warrior, and now I'm finding trouble fighting some amateur. A pity." Amir smiled. "Time is a great destroyer. With time, the strong are made weak and the weak die off. However, occasionally, a weakling becomes strong enough to take his place at the top." "You are nowhere near the top. You are but a child throwing a tantrum, fighting an old man. I admit that you're leagues above where you used to be, but you are still no match for a seasoned master like myself. It's time to put an end to this fiasco. I admit that you fought admirably, and you were able to keep me on my toes the whole fight. This was fun, but it's over. I'm finishing it now." McGill, still holding his sword with both hands, bent his knees and placed the sword on the side, tip pointing forward. "As you wish." A wave of solemnity washed over Amir's face as he leaned forward, sword and dagger crossed, legs bent and ready to spring forward. The tension was palpable. McGill's foot slowly slid back, widening his stance, readying a pounce. Suddenly, the keychain on his belt popped off. Amir watched as it slowly descended. A clank echoed down the dead silent hallways, and the two dashed forward. With a loud roar, McGill pushed his sword into a powerful swing from under. Amir stopped in his tracks, turned sideways, and leaned back. The blade flew just past his chin. Immediately after the dodge, Amir swung with the sword from the right. McGill was barely able to lower his blade in time to block the swing. The crossguards locked in place. Amir spun the dagger around so the blade was facing backwards and pushed it forward. McGill took one hand off the blade and grabbed Amir's forearm. Both sides pushed forward with all their strength, both equally unable to overtake each other. But just as Amir was about to jump back, McGill smiled. He jerked back lightly as his foot shot up and pushed forward towards Amir's chest. But to McGill's surprise, Amir did not try to reel back or even attempt to dodge the attack. Instead, he stepped forward. McGill's boot slammed into Amir's lower left ribs and let out a crunch that could make the most hardened doctor cringe. The smile faded and McGill's eyes filled with terror because despite the brutal impact, Amir pushed forward. It was one grounded leg versus two. McGill began to lose his balance as the rage of a tortured soul pushed against his resolve. With one final attempt at victory, he unlocked the swords and swung at Amir's neck. The descent felt long. Time flowed slowly. There was an odd sense of tranquility in the fall, emitting somewhere from under the veil of tension and mortal fear. Alas, the outcome was no mystery. Both fighters knew what was going to happen after the descent was over. A loud thump followed a rough landing. Owen, leaning around the doorframe, squinted to see the victor. The soft light from the lanterns revealed blood running down from the blade that had sliced through the side of Amir's neck. McGill opened his mouth to speak, but no sound escaped. His face began to grow red, and he looked down. The arm he held onto was now pressed tightly against his chest. He could see the sheen of a golden pummel sitting on top of the clenched fist. With a swift tug and the sound of tearing flesh, Amir removed the dagger, allowing McGill to take a deep and painful breath. The blade pressed against the neck fell to the ground, along with the arm that extended it. Amir dropped his sword and sliced off a piece of cloth out of McGill's shirt. "Impossible," McGill muttered as Amir stood up, dagger still in hand, and placed the cloth over his wound. "Your body. You should have reeled back. You should have flinched. How?" Amir pondered for a moment. When a man is broken, he has two choices: stay broken or fix himself. Say a man fixes himself and is immediately broken once again. What happens then? The two choices stand before him once more. His rage fuels his resolve as he fixes himself over and over until there is nothing left to fix. A broken vase can only be glued together again and again until it becomes comprised of more soft glue than clay, at which point it cannot be broken. It becomes flexible, unwavering, and unable to break again. My mind no longer perceives pain like others do. The concept does not faze me, nor does the prospect of a future pain cause me fear. He pressed his fingers against the broken ribs and began applying pressure to them. The crack made Owen cringe in disgust. The odious sight nearly made him vomit. "But you could have died," shouted McGill as a wad of blood escaped his lips. A sequence of painful coughs followed the outburst until he finally caught a shallow breath. Amir waited for the fit to be over. "It may be true that I could have died if my ribs have punctured my heart and lungs. However, do you truly believe that I fear death? Some fates are far worse than death, such as eternal pain. Since I was dragged across a rocky path a long time ago, death is much less severe by comparison. A victory is a victory, even if I die in the process." "You're insane," McGill whispered, still struggling to breathe. Sweat and blood running streams down his cheeks. "Indeed!" Amir's tone suddenly changed to something of pure joy. "Now, without further ado, it is time that I do the thing I have dreamed of for so long. Something that put a smile on my face every night. I simply cannot contain my excitement." A huge grin curled from ear to ear as Amir kicked away the sword and pressed the boot against the wound in McGill's chest. He let out a soft grunt from the pain. The smile grew as Amir began to giggle and push his foot further. The boot twisted and ribs began to pop one by one. McGill let out a horrifying shriek that only fueled Amir's bloodlust. "I know why you act the way you do. You and Ren were interrogators before you became the Royal Guards. You see vanity in vice, so I brought vice to you. And I have to admit, this is exhilarating. I can see why you two chose this profession." His foot pushed down again and twisted, causing McGill's limbs to convulse violently in a paroxysm of anguish. Amir let out a vile and maniacal laughter that almost drowned out McGill's screams. "Do you remember what you always said? Because I recall it perfectly. 'Sing for us, you Sidesian bird,' you always shouted. Now the bird is out of the cage, and it is your turn to sing. Sing! Sing!" "Stop!" a voice roared with such vigor that it drowned out all other sounds. Amir's smile faded as he glanced solemnly at his uncle, who stood in the middle of the hallway, arms to his sides, and with a grimace that Amir had never seen before. "Stop?" he asked in a surprisingly unfazed tone. "Why should I stop?" "You have done enough. Stop now," responded Owen, his scowl unwavering. "Enough? Have the years of agony this man owes me passed so soon? What reason could you have for stopping me?" "Because you still have humanity left in you." The comment hit Amir harder than any physical impact could. His face tensed into a rivaling grimace. "What did you say?" he growled through his teeth as he dropped the blood-soaked cloth and stepped off of McGill. "The years of torture have paved a mask of fury and insanity over your once kind face. But your eyes shine from behind that conglomerate of hatred. You still have humanity. I know I may not be able to revive the old you, but I can preserve the humanity you have left. And perhaps there is a chance that one day I may speak to the Amir I once knew." Amir's eyes flashed in profound wrath. He paced towards Owen with heavy steps. Amir was a head taller than Owen, but the height did not intimidate him in the slightest. Both eyes locked less than a foot apart. Pressure grew and pushed down on the minds. Seconds that seemed like hours passed, ticking like a bladed pendulum, slowly lowering. Each moment was a moment closer to the unknown. Mortal terror filled Owen's mind, but his eyes did not allow the fear to shine. A few more seconds passed, and he couldn't keep the facade up any longer. He stood in the stream, trying to hold his ground, but the water was rising quickly. Suddenly, a split second from being swept away, Amir smiled. "I suppose you're right. I shouldn't linger here any longer. I have more pressing objectives to complete." He turned to McGill. "I will be merciful this time and allow you to die by the side of your dearest ally." Owen let out a sigh of relief as Amir grabbed Wren's corpse and dragged it to McGill, who finally caught his breath. "You think you will win, don't you?" he muttered calmly with an air of resignation. "Clearly. Nothing but the sight of Destrian's corpse can quell my fury." McGill coughed out another wad of blood and smirked. "There is no victory. Even if you kill Destrian, you will not find happiness. Your future is paved in thorns." "Then I will walk down that path unflinching." The words fell like boulders. McGill's head dropped to the side as he stared into Wren's soulless eyes. "We leave at once," he commanded with a wave, picking up his sword, and began to walk down the hallway. Owen caught up when Amir suddenly stopped. He turned his head, the fire back in his eyes. "You may have stopped me for now, but I will get my hands on Destrian, and you will not get in my way." Owen blinked and looked away. There was no appropriate response to be made. All he could do was let the flash fire suffocate by silence. The two began once again to pace down the hallway. "I know that I can't convince you to stop, but will you consider what McGill said? You and I enjoyed friendly arguments in philosophy, logic, and ethics. You were a very logical person back then. If you use logic now, you may see that your objective is futile. It may be that you will never achieve happiness. Therefore, the most logical thing is to avoid further fighting. You can still escape now. You need no more bloodshed. There is no benefit. Amir let out a soft chuckle. Logic and revenge? You seem to be comical as ever, Uncle. Do you truly believe that doing this is on the basis of logic? There is no logic in revenge. Revenge goes against all forms of reasoning, but it is what makes it so alluring. I have lived my life doing things that I believed were right, and the life brought me to the lowest pits of hell. These past years molded me in the wrong, the illogical, the vile. I am done following the logical path. Destrian will pay for what he has done. Killing him may not fix anything, but I know that it will arouse a most sublime sensation. An evil beam stretched across Amir's face as Owen hung his head in defeat. The fight that ran through Amir's mind countless times in his imprisonment was approaching. An aura of bloodlust emanated with every step. Amir's wicked ambitions walked like heavy-gated beasts beside him, dissipating any virtue that radiated from his companion. He escaped the dreadful confines of the cell. However, the darkness followed. He may have triumphed in his first step, but the real challenge was now beginning. The long-awaited meeting approached, and a clash of two evils was near. Chapter 2. The Two Evils. The endless gullies of a ravaged mind, carved over the years by profound hatred, were now flooded with anticipation. The anxiety only fueled his insanity. Progressing through the long hallway, Amir noticed a small stream of blood rolling down the wall up ahead. He stopped before the flowing line, rubbing his eyes. At length he turned to Owen with a confused air, but Owen's eyes portrayed nothing more than mundane meditation. His blank stare answered all, and when Amir's eyes turned back to the wall, the blood was gone. Briskly, the two made it up the small set of stone stairs to an open door, accommodated by two lit lanterns on each side. Amir cautiously poked his head out into the dark hallway and looked both ways. A pair of lanterns on the other side of the doorway provided just enough light to see a wall in the distance on the left and a door about equally as far on the right. The two stepped into the hallway when Amir suddenly stopped, causing Owen to recoil as if he had run into a stone wall. What turned to Owen was no longer the bloodthirsty face from before. The dim light from the lanterns shaded the chiseled precipice, atop of which two dark voids stared down at Owen with something far beyond somber. With the pale face of a porcelain doll and a withered stare of a dead willow, Amir stood lifeless. Finally his lips parted, and a cold breath hit Owen. Behind the breath came a faint and raspy voice. I was wrong. The voice was mingled heavily with melancholy, and the muscles which initially caused the triumphant smile quickly relaxed into something between anxiety and solemnity. I realize my error. I presume that my rage pushes me to revenge. However, it is not the case. I realize this now. A soft smile appeared on Owen's face. Does this mean you escape rather than fight? Amir's expression made no response to the question. You misconstrue. How so? I do not feel that I'm following the path because of hatred, but rather obligation. I may loathe Destrian with my body and soul, but it is not the hatred that drives me. My mind has become calm, and I begin to see things clearly. I feel as if I were born to do this. It now appears to me as a benevolent path rather than a wicked one. Owen's face became solemn as before. Why tell me this? I hold no importance to your plan beyond being a mere hostage. It is because I realize something. I know that Destrian fights as more than a first-rate duelist, meaning my madness may not be enough. I will not fail. I will end his life no matter what. However, It is not beyond me to realize that I may die in the process. That being said, this could be the very last moment we speak. Before we proceed, pray join me for one last debate, like old times. It was clear that there was no persuading Amir to resign his plan. Very well, said Owen with a soft smile. The answer came quickly and enthusiastically, but there was no hiding the subtle air of pity. Splendid, Amir began. My question is for you. Is there an afterlife? It did not take long for Owen to fish out his answer. I believe that there is one. Furthermore, I believe that any man can be saved from eternal torment of hell. The way I see it, God is a divine puppeteer of our world. He pulls the strings on each human. However, each human may pull back to an extent. The Lord guides us by pulling us in the right direction. Despite our free will, most of us pull but remain in the path He created for us. Besides free will, there is sin. Sin hangs heavy on the shoulder of its bearer, keeping them grounded until they are ready to pass. All humans sin, but if prior to our passing we repent our sins, the Lord may still pull us into His kingdom where we are shed of our strings. The interruption left Owen gaping in confusion. How did you... An empty smile appeared on Amir's face. Years have passed since our last friendly debate, and it appears that you have not changed the slightest. Dig your memory and recall how each of our debates ended. If my memory serves, the conclusion was always the same. My opinions came from the heart, while your opinions came from books and scriptures. True belief does not come from words on a paper, nor does it develop from the perceptions of other words. True belief comes from within. Alas, I never had the heart to point out your massive fallacy. Owen's mortified gaze hit the floor in shame. The Strings of Virtue. A novel you must have read cover to cover and then dumped on me in the hopes that I might retain some sanity and join you in your piety. Did you believe that I would allow those books to sit in the cupboard? Or perhaps you completely forgot which books you even brought me. I suppose it no longer matters. In any case, I will tell you what I believe, using your belief as an archetype. I believe that if this God pulls the strings, then it is clear that mine were torn a long time ago. But it is not the weight of my sins that caused it to tear, but rather the weight of my conviction. And if I am to sink to the lowest bowels of hell, then I will have no one to blame but myself, and I will accept my place among the like-minded demons with dignity. It seemed that Owen realized that this was not another friendly debate, but rather a farewell. He looked down, unable to conjure a single word. Come, barked Amir quietly, jaded from the final outburst, and began to make his way down the hallway. Owen followed closely behind. After traversing the long shroud of darkness, the two came upon a stone wall with a gray metal door. To the right of the door, and pressed tightly into the wall, was a square metal plate about the size of a seat cushion, stippled in a grid pattern with small slashes about the length of a pinky nail. Under closer inspection, Amir realized that the slashes were in fact tiny switches, all facing up. Destrian never gave me the password. They preserved my ignorance with a cloth sack over my head every time we approached this door. All we can do now is wait for Destrian to arrive with a group of guards. After a moment of thought, Amir placed the lantern on the floor and began to quickly pick at the top of the plate with his dagger. After a minute of metallic clicks and clanks, the plate popped off and was immediately placed on the floor against the wall. Behind the plate was what looked to be thousands of gears, creating a deep cavern into the wall. Owen looked over Amir's shoulder as he carefully turned the gear on the top left. Suddenly, the wall let out a loud, hollow clunk that echoed down the hallway. Amir retracted his hand and gazed at the oily black sheen that covered his fingers. Inconceivable. How did you... I studied various locks and traps in my spare time. It served as one of my pastimes until I was locked away here. He placed his hand on the handle and turned it slowly. The handle clicked softly and the door loosened. I trust that this is the only lock? To my knowledge. Amir looked down at his dagger and sighed softly. I suppose this is the end, Uncle. He took a shallow breath and let out a small, nervous cough. Since I was a child, I looked up to you, and it seems too distasteful to leave things the way they are. You may oppose my plans and pity my pathetic crusade, but it matters not. If the result is death, do not pity me. It is the natural order. Death is an inevitable part of life, and if death is what awaits me, then I cannot run from it. You may still salvage your life, Amir. You may still capture a normal end to this and live a common life. Normal? There is nothing normal about what has transpired, and there is no need to salvage what is already repaired. I am no longer broken. My life is my own. My path is my own. Owen looked down at the lantern disheartened for what seemed to be the 100th time. He watched the flame move as the shadow of Amir danced listlessly before him. Amir took a deep breath and slowly pulled the door slightly open. There will be no speaking beyond this point. Under no circumstance will you leave my side. I plan on using you to distract the guards. You'll need to persuade the guards into leaving, lest I'm forced to deal with them both and create a bloodbath. I cannot promise success. If you do not succeed, their blood will be on your hands. Owen nodded dubiously. We will not fail. Now, follow close. The door slowly and silently opened, drawing in a dry breeze to break the stale, damp air. Despite being deep underground, the next area still held a faint scent of the manor. The scent caused countless memories to flood Amir's mind, but only stayed for a moment. He grabbed the lantern and proceeded into the darkness ahead. The light immediately met with a set of stairs going up in a spiral. The two began ascending, each keeping their gaits as soft as a couple of cats on the prowl. After a minute or so, the two emerged from another door into another dark hallway. This hallway was short in length and held a few doors on each side. Small streams of blood began to appear on the walls once more, but Amir ignored these hallucinations caused by his madness. To the right of the staircase, the hallway led the two to the final door. This door led the night prowlers into a hallway lit by candles. This was the basement of the manor. 4 stories above them, 2 guards stood stalwart on both sides of an ornate metal gate leading into the dining hall. From the closed doors, the two could faintly hear Destrian loudly reciting his daily endeavors. One of the guards began to chuckle softly from under his illustrious golden helmet. A quiet rattle came from the extravagant gold-plated armor emblazoned with the royal Meridian crest, a phoenix swirling within a laurel. If Eric fails to return, you might find him face down in a privy somewhere by dawn. The other guard snickered and tugged at his breastplate. Your stomach will endure. What a pity, an old man with the mind of a toddler. I haven't eaten since morning. My stomach is on the verge of leaping out of my mouth and strangling you. I can smell the feast they're having from here and it's killing me. Oh, Eric, you will suffer for this. I see that you have no intention of losing the most peevish royal guard title, the latter stammered through a light giggle. Watch your tongue, Candon, or you will be next on the menu. Acting tough never works if everybody knows that you're soft inside. Keep talking like that and I'll show you exactly how soft your insides are. Both let out a light-hearted, friendly chuckle when a figure appeared from behind the corner on the left and tore through the joyful atmosphere. The figure that appeared before them was Owen. He approached with a haggard waddle, clothing covered in blood, drawing breath quickly with a dry and raspy tone. Before either guard could utter a word, Owen placed his fingers over his lips and made a soft hiss. "What happened?" Candon whispered, trying his hardest to keep the armor from clanking. "Listen." He took a second to catch his breath. "Stay quiet, or he will hear us. An assassin has infiltrated the manor. He is massacring the guards. I was able to escape him amidst the slaughter, but this was the only way I could run. Now stick together and find him." "Are you insane? We are stationed here to protect Destrian," Candon replied, bewildered, eyes moving rapidly through his visor. "If all the guards perish before he reaches you two, there is no way the two of you could defeat him. Trust me on this." "But we cannot leave our post." "Look, go and round up the guards. Summon the military. Do anything. I will lock the gates from the inside with Destrian in the dining hall. There will be no way for him to break into it." The two guards looked at each other and gazed scrupulously around the hallway. "There's no time. Go now." "Ah, damn it all to hell. Fine, let's go, Jason." The two hurried as Owen slowly approached the gate. Amir appeared from behind the corner on the other side, dagger in his left hand and a long sword in the right, both covered in blood. "When we enter, I will attack Destrian immediately. You will lock the gate behind me so no guards manage to interfere. Otherwise, I will have to take their lives as well. I should not need to take more than you have already made me take. Are you set?" Owen nodded reluctantly. "Very well." He pushed the left part of the gate open and charged in with Owen close behind him. After the two entered, Owen threw the gate shut and turned the lever to lock it. His ears were ready to hear shouting and clashing of swords, but he heard nothing of the sort. A chilling silence fell upon the dining hall after the echoes from the locking mechanism faded. Even the thought of turning around seemed too daunting, but Owen managed to tear his eyes from the gate. The dining hall stretched the length of about 5 rooms. The white marble floor reflected 3 massive chandeliers, 2 stories above, along with ornate braziers that guarded each pillar lined up against the walls. Under the multi-dome ceiling stood a long oak table, at the end of which stood a feast of meats, breads, and fruit. But behind all of that sat the man that made Amir's blood boil. "Destrian!" Amir roared with a subtle hint of hesitation. "Why is she here?" he inquired, pointing his sword just to the right of Destrian. Owen leaned to peek around Amir, only to meet eyes with Catherine, who sat in a black dress next to Destrian around the corner of the table. Another silence fell over the hall. A sharp crack from a distant brazier echoed down the room. Finally, Destrian stood up with a frightful expression. His long black hair fell over his face and his mouth opened, but Catherine was the first to respond. "Amir, how are—" "Why is she here?" he interrupted once more. "Catherine arrived earlier from Silesia to visit my manor." Destrian's voice was much deeper than Amir remembered. His voice was smooth and powerful, each word enunciated as if it came from a seasoned speaker. "And she will keep quiet while we fight. Draw your sword, Destrian. Let us finish this." Destrian looked down below his sharp, black 3-piece suit with a white undershirt and a puffy cravat to see a rapier hanging over a pair of smooth black pants that matched the outfit. On the other side was an identical rapier, also hanging from a holster and residing within a leather scabbard like the previous. "I never wanted it to end like this." "Yes, I am aware of the ending you had planned for me." "Look, Amir, all of this. I made a mistake. If you do not draw your blade, I will be forced to make you. Amir, he uttered, voice breaking. There was a distinct overtone of remorse in his voice, so profound that it managed to slightly repress Amir's rage. If I begin to hear what I think is an apology, I swear by... I apologize, he shouted, stunning Amir for a moment. I do not expect you to forgive me for my heinous acts, but please allow me a moment to explain. Yes, I loathe you and everything you have done. And what happened to you was my true intention at first, but it has been eating away at me slowly, like some insidious rot slowly dissolving me. The reason I had for assigning Wren and McGill as your keepers was only because I could trust them most. I knew that they would be occupied torturing me. Oh, they were more than happy to do unspeakable things. Things that even your worst nightmares cower from. All these things that I had to endure for years. Have you even attempted to fathom what I went through? Yes, it ran through my mind every night. How could I bring myself to do such a thing to my own brother? It ate away at me. But I was far too cowardly to change anything. The only way to free you was to send you overseas to a colony. Although, I suppose it no longer pertains to our situation. You want revenge, and that cannot be helped. This is the time where I pay for my mistakes. Destrian pulled out a rapier and held it in his left hand. His eyes gleamed with such deep sadness that Amir began to meditate on the actions transpiring before him. The boiling anger that was now trapped within him began to direct itself to his own conscience. His body refused to move. Something in Destrian's voice kept him questioning his fury. Something in Amir told him that Destrian's apologies were genuine. This was not the same Destrian that carried Amir from the crash so long ago. I realize that you have no trust in what I say, but it matters not. I shall allow you to have the revenge you desire. It is what you desire, and I have no right to keep it from you. But before we fight, I will tell you this, the reason for my unscathed appearance during the crash. Amir's eyes became as white as a cat in the night. I presume that you spent some time questioning Owen about the night. And here is the truth. When the collision occurred, the cabin split. Catherine was instantly thrown aside, while the horse from the other wagon was on its way to break my body. In an instant before the impact, you drove in front of me and took the full blow of the horse's skull. I was thrown into a soft bush while the destroyed wagon toppled over you. Amir's entire body felt numb and weightless. A thunderbolt could not shake him as much as the statement. That cannot be true. I would never save you, he shouted, throwing his arm to the side. I realize that. I think back to that night and remain in doubt. I know that you would never save me, but I am grateful that you did. What I did to you was beyond wrong. No one deserves a fate so cruel. I cannot turn back time, although I wish every night that I could. I was so afraid to confront you, but now you stand before me, rage pumping through your veins, ready to cut me down. I never intended for a end like this, but I know that you have survived through countless nights of unthinkable pain only to fight me. Who am I to stop you? Come, fight me with rapiers like old times. What do you say, brother? The words came out as soothing as honey. There was no remedy more potent to tranquilize Amir's enraged state. His mind planned a massacre of a demon, but he was now faced with a fair, brotherly duel. Thoughts and different voices began to flood Amir's head with their nonsensical shouts. He has changed! He is lying! Kill him! Wait! But suddenly, a whisper from his conscience drowned out the madness. Your rage has run dry. Can you still defeat an enemy that stands before you? No. As difficult as it was to fathom, the voice was correct. Amir's heart dropped, and a fear long forgotten, a fear drowned in a sea of madness and fury, was now resurfacing. He opened his mouth, but before he could utter a word, Destrian lowered his rapier and gave a warm smile. Let us put an end to this nightmare, brother. His voice was so deeply imbued with honor and grace. Each word struck a lethal blow to Amir's madness, cutting away for a fear, a feeling of helplessness that was kept hidden for so long. Its absurd resurgence encumbered his limbs and flesh as it turned to lead. In an instant, Destrian threw up his arm, launching the rapier in a high arc over the long table. Amir watched as the rapier approached, pommel first, intricate metal swirls of the crossguard gleaming lively under the glow of the chandeliers. The sword slipped Amir's fingers as his hand ascended and received the new weapon. With a graceful swipe, he caught the rapier by the grip just above his head. But before he could lower the blade, a sudden sensation shot through his body. He paused as the mind searched for the origin of this odd feeling. Was it the cold of the grip? His mind asked itself. Did one of my muscles tear? His eyes scanned slowly down his arms until his chin met with his cravat. And what he saw when he looked down was his own weary eyes reflecting back at him. Amir stumbled back as the blood ran over the reflection caused by the dagger lodged in his abdomen. His two weapons slipped through his fingers like water, and he dropped to his knees. A laugh echoed down the dining hall, a laugh that denoted a cascade of memories that made Amir's skin crawl. Oh, how splendid the sensation of a fruitful plan! The conceited overtone that Amir remembered returned to Destrian's voice. It took me countless attempts to perfect an underhand throw of a balanced dagger from such a distance. But my efforts were not in vain, it seems. And do not worry, this was only one of the plans I devised to crush you in case you escaped. You had no chance, regardless of the time of your attack. Amir pulled the blood-stained dagger and let it fall to the floor as he pressed his hand tightly against the wound. Now, have no fear, brother. Fratricide was not on my supper menu today. I purposely missed all the vital organs. And now allow me to explain everything with the truth. After you died, Catherine and I became close friends. After some time, I asked for her hand in marriage, and she happily accepted. At length, she gained my trust, enough trust, in fact, for me to tell her what happened. And, best of all, she did not only forgive me, but agreed that what I have done is just. The betrayal felt cold, colder than any Arctic stream or rapid. Even for someone as stone-hearted as Amir, who lived in the shadow of betrayal, this was far too difficult to bear. Only a couple of words managed to escape his lips. Catherine, why? Catherine rose from her chair and parted her long black dress. Your ideals were flawed. Your fallacies are what pushed me to favor the path that Destrian takes. He has the best wishes for Marinus. I am not a proud Senesian. I stand behind Destrian's attempts to allow prejudice against them. Marinus is my new home, and I intend to live happily in it. And I certainly don't need you. Her words fell over Amir like a mudslide. Do you realize now? No one is on your side. Your path, your ideals, all nothing but self-righteous cries for change. One man can only do so much. One man can only cry so loud. And you, my brother, have to cry out alone. The feeling changed once more. He was beginning to feel the boiling rage of betrayal that he once felt when he woke up in that dreaded room. The fear slowly melted, and his arms began to move. "I will kill you," he uttered in a voice pushing towards madness. "Amir, you have lost!" Destrian exclaimed jubilantly, throwing his arms to the heavens. "The loss of blood will take its toll on your body soon. If you wish to remain alive, I suggest you allow us to escort you to Dr. Prinwick. There is nothing left for you here. Give up." Amir tore off his waistcoat, revealing the blood-stained undershirt that covered his arms to the wrists. The voices began to brew like a storm as his hands spun the waistcoat around his wound tightly and tied it. "That will not aid you for long, Amir. The blood will keep running." The fear seemed to dissipate. Legs regained strength and began to lift him, one after the other. Now on one knee, he began to fish for the grounded blades when a dull sensation stopped him, and his knee dropped back to the floor. He turned on his leg, only to find the rapier piercing through his calf. "Please," a nervous, shaky voice whispered from behind him. "I beg of you, Amir, do not fight. It is not good for anyone. Please retire this pointless crusade." But despite the attempt to tranquilize Amir, to hammer in the final nail into his coffin, Owen inadvertently reignited the inferno in Amir's mind and body. The aura around him quickly changed from simple anger to pure madness. "Do you see now?" shouted Destrian with a light snicker. "Everyone opposes you. You are nothing but a child throwing a tantrum. Now, even your precious uncle has betrayed you. Is this not indication enough to give up?" The words grazed over Amir as he slowly tucked the dagger that he had dropped earlier into his belt and began to rise. His body seemed to almost levitate up like a specter from a grave. A slow tug with the right arm, and the rapier slipped out like a needle. As blood began to ooze out, eyes raised and locked with the fiend across the table. The arrogant smile and cold eyes of Destrian stared at the solemn mask behind which the storm of a ravaged soul beamed through the wide, furious eyes. The gaze that Amir cast could make even a most bloodthirsty marauder cower, but Destrian stood impossibly unfazed. He stared into hell itself and remained resolute. "Fine, have it your way," he exclaimed as he grabbed another throwing dagger from under the table and placed it in his left hand as he drew the rapier. A sigh escaped his wicked smile. "Very well, if this is how it must be. Catherine, would you kindly stand behind one of the columns? I shall end this swiftly." As Catherine bit her lip nervously and made her way to the nearest pillar, Amir broke the stare and turned around. And for a brief moment, a moment that lasted only about a flash of lightning, he met eyes with Owen. The glare shattered Owen's will instantly. His pale face was indication enough that he was crumbling under the overwhelming pressure. The glare came as fast as it went, and Amir grabbed the sword which rested on the marble. Owen's eyes became lifeless as he stumbled back into the gate, slowly restoring order to his trembling breath. "I remain generous as your deviance flared," Destrian said solemnly as he raised his rapier and pointed it at Amir. "I allowed life despite your actions against the Meridians. It is clear now that I was being magnanimous, just as your father was. If death is your wish, then I shall grant it to you with equal generosity." Amir looked at his brother and then down at his two blades. His mind overflowed with chaos, an infinite maelstrom of voices shouting within him. Nothing could be heard clearly until a single, roaring voice drowned out the rest. "You endured a sea of blood," the voice rumbled. Amir blinked once, and the floor below him began to spawn tiny beads of blood that filled slowly. "Let the sea of blood wash him away." He blinked once more, and the blades began to drip with a deep crimson along with the walls and columns of the room. Blood began to trickle down everything in the room, including Catherine and Owen. However, Destrian remained untouched. "Go on now. Show me the power of your madness," Destrian cried with a wicked grin. Torrents of blood erupted from the marble as Amir exploded into a sprint. Rapier in the right hand and longsword in the left, both pointing to either side. He leaped on the table and darted forward, each step sending a splash of red drops skyward. Destrian took a small step back and pointed his rapier lazily, keeping his body loose and relaxed. The initial strike came flying from above. Destrian deflected the sword and then immediately blocked the rapier swipe from the side. Upon landing, Amir slid and spun around, swinging with all his strength. Destrian effortlessly nullified each strike with perfectly timed blocks. It was a battle of a raging tornado and a smooth river, a battle between a berserker and a duelist. Each attack from Amir was accompanied by a prompt roar, while Destrian's blocks and parries were molded from silent focus. Each metallic clank echoed through the massive room and sent waves of blood to paint the walls and floors with abstract, but seemed to flow right through Destrian. As the fight went on, Destrian's informal, elegant stance became more nonchalant and almost indolent. An uninterested smirk appeared on his face as he continued to deter the barrage of attacks. "Enough of these duelist pleasantries, Amir. Surely the years of torment conjured a more adamant statement. Surely you came here to show me more than this petty performance." The statement struck Amir like a warhorse. He reeled back, trying to catch his breath. There was no taunt that could shake Amir, but what Destrian said was the simple truth. The fact took a stranglehold on Amir's throat. He came to win, to exact revenge, but it was clear that the key to victory was far beyond raw power and fury alone. He pondered as the room bled a heinous spectacle of crimson around him. When, finally, a vile thought entered the storm of madness. He tossed the rapier up and hurled the dagger that was resting on his waist at Destrian. The expression on Destrian's face remained the same. He leaned to dodge the blade flying at his head dubiously, keeping his eyes on Amir, pondering the intention of the attack. Something was clearly wrong. As the blade flew past, the feeling heightened until a realization hit. His eyes broke contact with his opponent, and he glared behind him to see the true reason for his attack. The blade was flying towards Catherine's head, which was peeking from behind a pillar. His body turned in an instant and slashed the dagger out of the air, sending it flying to the side. His head instantaneously snapped to see whether an attack was coming. The sheen of a blade came quick, much quicker than he anticipated. It came from the side, aiming to split his skull. Destrian's body reeled back with all its energy, his neck bending to minimize damage. The blade made contact and tore through his skin, but to Amir's misfortune, no further. A second swipe came, but Destrian parried it effortlessly. Amir jumped back and picked up the rapier just as it hit the floor. Both shared a look of disappointment as Destrian wiped a thin stream of blood off his cheek with his thumb. Although the cut gave Amir no advantage, deep inside him a warm feeling appeared. This was the first time he had seen Destrian bleed. "You really know how to anger me. Go on, revel in your small, hollow victory. I played along with your fight, since this duel will be our last. But you took it too far. Targeting a bystander outside the duel is beyond vile. But of course, you see this as a fight to the death, victory to be acquired by any means. It seems that you have no humanity left in that hollow shell. If death is what you wish to see, then you will watch as your last breath escapes your lips. Prepare your last thoughts. This is where they end. Destrian released a long breath and stared vacantly at his rapier, which was pointing down diagonally. Amir composed his stance, ready to defend. The feeling of fear was absent in the constant typhoon of thoughts, but a new feeling unrose: uncertainty. The face Destrian put on was new. Whatever attack he was planning, Amir was uncertain. The feeling gripped his body, tensing every muscle. His eyes focused to their utmost potential, watching for some of the minutest movements. Destrian took another soft breath and froze. The room was silent. Catherine was hiding behind a pillar, only peeking out with one eye. Owen stood beside the gate solemnly, waiting for the conclusion of the fight. Everything seemed to stop. Even the blood that oozed all around froze. Amir kept his eyes wide, but in a singular blink, just a split second of blindness, Destrian was gone. Amir's eyes darted around to see Destrian's body low, just to the right, shooting his rapier up at the heart. The speed was nearly superhuman. Amir dodged back, slightly deflecting the blade as it tore through the cloth like butter. The attack disrupted his balance. Destrian pushed forward with a flurry of thrusts. The speed was far beyond any man's reaction. Amir stumbled backwards, dodging and defending frantically. One by one, small cuts began to appear on his face, arms, and torso. Finally, catching his balance, Amir pushed forward, deflecting the rapier with his sword and the dagger with his rapier. He pushed forward with his shoulder, knocking Destrian back and giving himself a moment of respite. "I suppose that I was wrong. Your newfound madness is nothing to scoff at," Destrian uttered calmly in a solemn air. "But how long can you survive, brother? How long can you fight through the toll of exsanguination?" Once again, Destrian was correct. Amir stumbled back and pressed his hip against the table. "He's right," he thought. "I'm fighting to survive, not to win. There is a limit to the prowess bestowed by this madness. I must figure out a way to push past this limit. I must change something. Something. My back is against death's door. There's no way out." "Raise your blade," shouted Destrian in a frustrated tone. "I will not have you fall like some diseased dog. Die with some dignity." Amir put the rapier on the table and looked at his hand. A hurricane of thoughts roared in his head, drowning out most ideas, spiking arbitrary emotions and instantly nullifying them. "I must do something. This madness failed to work. It must be cleansed. Every storm has an eye. I must find it." With that sentiment, his hand grabbed the left bicep and the fingers pressed deeply into it. "Pain is something every human requires," he whispered to the mass of mixed emotions raging within his head. "All that I thought about was my rage, the pain that I endured because of him. But I need to push past that and remember." His hand gripped tighter until he could feel a soft, warm sensation in his arm. He closed his eyes, blocking out the world, embracing the darkness within his mind as he was absorbed into the storm. The warmth from his arm spread to his whole body. It felt as if he was floating, and for the first time, Amir felt tranquility. He began to experience the same peace that one feels when on the verge of plummeting into sleep. But as he descended, a sudden sound of rustling leaves began to fill his ears, and the warmth on his arm turned into a sharp pain. Chapter 3. The Rose. "Ow!" Amir shouted as his eyes snapped open. "Dozing off again, Emmy?" Catherine's voice asked softly. Amir sat on dry ground between two thick roots, back against a massive oak tree that's canopy blocked out the beaming sun above. Ahead of him was a landscape of infinite, empty fields that stretched into the horizon, decorated by a bright blue sky, with a few white puffs sailing freely. "You know I hate that name, and why must you pinch me awake every time?" he muttered. "Because politely asking you to awaken has yet to work," Catherine replied with a smile as she patted down her uneven folds on her silky blue dress that stretched to a pair of black, low-heeled shoes. Her long brown hair was tied in a bun and held together by a beautiful wooden rose, coated and polished so that it may avoid decaying. "The ball will begin in a few hours. We should help make preparations. Getting dressed would make for a good start." Her words seemed to pass through Amir, as if unsaid, as he stared off into the distance, light wind grazing his loose brown pants and tan overshirt. "Amir," she began with a light clap, "you cannot let Destrian control your emotions. Fleeing here after every quarrel with him only bolsters his ego. Focusing your efforts on this petty rivalry will never lead to happiness." Amir let out a long-winded sigh and looked up at Catherine in listless relief. "I suppose you're right. From a logical standpoint, logic never curls my grimace into a grin or unfurls my jumble of insidious and dreadful thoughts." "Be that as it may," Catherine quickly responded, "but there is always more than one way to mend tattered emotions. The Marquis of Vivianet has promised to bring his legendary Chateau d'If red wine." Bitterness to drown bitterness. An unlikely prospect for the revitalization of joy, Amir muttered, with his lack of resolve that paralleled a house cat in the sight of guests. Catherine's lips rose concurrently with her eyebrows as she assessed the poignant notion. "Oh, there's no need to be so melancholy. Will you miss the ball for a mere petty squabble that ended hours ago? And what could possibly be your plan? Sit here till nightfall?" "Gladly," Amir fired back, face solemn, and turned towards the endless fields, an aura of gloom brooding over him like a swarm of thirsty mosquitoes, draining any drop of delight that might form. A small cloud rolled over the sun and put a slight shade over the green meadows. Catherine raised her arm above her head and plucked out the rose, releasing a cascade of hair in a waterfall of hazel. "Do you remember what you told me when you gave me this 5 years ago?" The shade under Amir's brow dissipated, and he raised his head and squinted with a faint smile. "How could I forget?" Realizing the efficacy of her inquiry, Catherine dispelled all other ideas and summoned one of her most vivid memories. "It was our first-year anniversary, and I had been disdainfully ridiculed by a crowd of nationalists that despised all Silesians, while on my way to meet you in Caramel Comte Winery." She looked up at the rustling leaves as her memory unraveled itself before her. "Only a few blocks from the turn, a child threw a small stone which hit me in the back of the head. As jarring as the occurrence was, it was not uncommon, but this was the first day I was discriminated against, with so little time in between. As I quitted the busy streets and made my way to the wooden stairs of the hill on Caramel Comte Winery, my fingers rubbed the pain from the inflated bump behind my ear. The stone failed to draw blood, but it was certainly successful in filling my mind with loathing and dread. I've never been so furious in my life, and to my misfortune, it happened to fall on the day I was so eager to traverse." "I had no idea this was happening to you. Why did you not tell me?" shouted Amir as he leapt to his feet, remnants of anger sparkling once again. "There was nothing you could do but look at the commoners with scorn if I did so." Amir gritted his teeth. "Those cowardly fools. All greetings and smiles until I'm absent. The true colors of those insolent assailants seep through." "Amir, please, let me finish." Amir's eyes dropped with shame. "I apologize. Continue." "This was long ago. The commoners have grown tame in the past years, so there's nothing for you to worry your already troubled mind with. Nevertheless, I remained furious at the time. I truly believed that my day was ruined and there was nothing anyone could do to redeem it. Until the two men in front of me opened the massive oak gates of the extraordinary castle of a restaurant, and I gazed into the nearly empty, dimly lit ballroom, in the middle of which stood a decorated table that you sat at, your smile beckoning me to approach. And despite the natural propensity of the mind to retain negativity after an acute and odious incident, the aesthetic turned my boiling blood to honey, and my streaming mind into a breezy prairie. I'm sure you remember that evening as well as I do. Or have your recent disputes with Destrin clouded your memory? Amir smirked as his chin elevated, as if trying to keep down a sip of wine after a fit of laughter. If I were to forget the most minute of details from an evening so uplifting, so unearthly splendid, well, I should be devoided of my title and riches and strapped upon a tree to die, for I would not be fit for anyone but the gizzards of vultures. Catherine let out a shy giggle, covering her mouth with her hand. Such grace with words. You seem to fancy yourself a writer, or perhaps an ornithologist. Could it be that your destiny lies with bird watching rather than commanding a country? Catherine's sarcastic jests were not uncommon, and even less uncommon were Amir's chipper reactions to them. He snickered lightly and grinned at the remark. It seems that I was right to marry you. But is there a point to your story? Yes, in a moment. Don't lose your quills over it. Amir rolled his eyes, still retaining the smirk from before, and leaning his shoulder against the thick brown trunk of the oak. Since we both remember the dinner quite vividly, I will skip to the conclusion. After a night of delightful food and wine, and sharing our nostalgic memories, you gave me a long velvet box in which laid a thin gold chain with a gold rose pendant, leaves of which spiraled around a diamond so massive most gemologists would deem fake at first sight. Seeing it made me overjoyed, as any woman would be at the sight of such a tremendous glamour. But it was not what I needed. And I do not know whether it was by luck that you decided to give me this rose, despite how mundanely you enunciated, and I give this to you. It pales in comparison to jewelry, but I made it, and I would like you to have it. But the gift changed my view of the future. I knew that you had no experience in carving, so it must have taken you weeks or even months to master it to such a degree. Amir's chuckle interrupted the story. Catherine, my dear, my love, if carving roses meant this much to you, you should have informed me long ago, so I may bestow thousands of them upon you. The importance comes not from when you are bestowed with 1,000 things, but when one thing bestows a meaningful message upon you. Amir's mouth curled sarcastically, but as he drew breath to spout a jest, Catherine lifted her finger and stifled it. But it was not just the rose that gave me so much optimism and filled me with the most jubilant spirit that still exists today. It was what you said. You and I have been through many perils, and the political path is what we chose. And we have many perils to endure in the future. Our relationship has shaken in the past, but now let this rose represent us. May our love only wither if this rose does. Tears began to congregate below the glittering black eyes as the sentence came to a close. That day has liberated me from my anxieties and regrets. All of the gnawing thoughts of uncertainty vanished. Your words helped me. So allow me to help you. Let this rose take on another attribute. Amir stared sentimentally at the rose, eager to be aided by the words. But at the same time reluctant to fall so easily to such a brief speech.
I know the contempt you feel for the citizens of Marinus, but at times this country remains unwavering to your ideals, so you focus your negativity towards Destrian. But you do not realize that he feeds on your hate. Nothing satisfies him more than to watch you feel defeated. So, from now on, this rose will also represent the relationship between you and Destrian, but in a different way. Let you only be defeated by Destrian when the shiny wood skin peels off of this rose and it blooms a bloody crimson. From now on, if he wins a debate, you will remain unfazed. If he defeats you in a spar, you will smile and say, "Good fight." From now on, you will never give him the pleasure of seeing you defeated. Feeling sadness or remorse is regular for human emotion, but the feeling of defeat is a choice. From now on, you will be unknown to defeat, and we will grow together, molded in optimism, as lovers, as leaders, and as winners.
Mimir bowed his head with a joyful snicker that emanated something between fulfillment and resignation. "This," Amir said audibly with a smile, "this is one of the countless reasons why I married you. The mind of a sage and the body of a goddess. I am truly beyond fortunate to have you." Catherine blushed and pressed the rose against Amir's chest with both hands, wrapped tightly around it, and sealed the new amendment to their covenant with a kiss as passionate as that of the first kiss of two lovers that have been separated for months. After Catherine drew back, she grabbed Amir's hand, which rested on her shoulder, and pressed the rose against his palm. Under the curved black eyelashes, and above the reddened cheeks, glistened a sheen of love itself, which seemed to pour into Amir's frame, rejuvenating his mind, body, and soul.
"It is your turn to take this,"
she commanded in a soft voice that felt solid with fortitude.
"If you ever feel doubt, pay mind to the rose and remember today."
It seemed as if the pressure of the world was lifted from Amir's shoulders. Unburdened and newly resolute, he took the rose with a warm smile. "My thanks. You have saved me from a most grueling future." Catherine angled her head to the side and nodded with a wide grin that shimmered with pearly white and showed an expression of gratitude for the moment the two shared.
"The future will remain grueling and full of hardships, but we will get through it together, hand in hand, hearts intermingled."
The two stood in silence, savoring the depleting remnants of the moment that they shared that seemed to forebode a certain, rewarding future. Nature sang a cadence of rustling leaves and distant birds to celebrate the benevolent pact of two of its intertwined fruit. As the wind picked up slightly, shifting of the branches allowed some light to penetrate the thick canopy and place the sheen of diamonds to inhibit Catherine's angelic eyes. Time seemed to move slowly, but when the moment came to a close, it felt as if only an instant had passed.
"Amir,"
asked Catherine dubiously. "Yes?"
"Ready?"
"What?" Amir asked, half perplexed, half absorbed in thought.
"The ball. Shall we make our way to it?"
Amir shook his head and put out his hand, pointing at the carriage. Yes, surely. Let us depart at once." Catherine giggled with her lively tone that seemed to mimic her younger self.
"You pick the most peculiar times to daydream."
Amir attempted to conjure a rebuttal, but the moment preceding left his mind soothed and feeble. "I suppose so. But don't let my inhibitions detain you. Lead the way."
"Then follow close, my love, or I may once again lose you within your dreamland."
Amir rolled his eyes and gave a half smile while nodding his head. Catherine turned around and began to walk as her arms wrapped around her scalp, gathering her hair, pressing it and holding it against her shoulder like one would a baby. Amir took a step forward to keep up with his beloved, but just as his foot touched the ground, the atmosphere changed from bliss to something dull and empty. The light began to wane, and the sounds of nature began to fade away. He took the next step, but his foot felt as if it was made of stone. This unnatural lethargy caused his step to take up as much time as 3 of Catherine's. In any natural situation, a man would feel a great deal of alarm, but Amir's mind remained calm, as though the residual bliss kept his mind from hastening. As his foot planted into the soft soil, the breeze drew colder. The atmosphere changed completely, and like a man that suddenly quitted a warm cottage and entered the brisk autumn field, his eyes began to dry and his fingers withered into fists. Catherine was now 15 feet ahead when she looked over her shoulder and turned with a concerned look splashed over her agitated undertone.
"What's the matter now, Amir?"
Amir opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden roar of wind behind him stifled the attempt.
"Amir? Is everything okay? You—"
Nothing interrupted Catherine, but her voice stopped instantly. Her body froze in time, along with her hair and dress. The dancing grass below her feet seemed to halt all movement along with her. Everything stopped, and all but the wind behind Amir became silent. His mind could not pinpoint an emotion to conjure. His body began to feel numb, and his hand suddenly felt a rush of warmth. Out of reaction, his eyes dropped to see the source of this surge. The source, to Amir's immediate surprise, was the rose which he held in his right hand, overflowing with blood. The petals, which once shared a rough brown color, now shared a sheen of crimson, which rolled down the stalk and dripped unendingly from Amir's fingers. "I have won." A deep but familiar voice erupted from the place that Catherine stood. Amir's eyes jumped up to see the one person he wanted to see least. The one person that made his eyes shrivel with disdain and his mind vortex into dread. "You may hide in your past, but the future will always catch up." Dressed in loose-fitting black trousers and a sumptuous black greatcoat trimmed with gold lace from which grew dozens of embroidered red roses that did even more to add to the swagger of his careless stance, Destrian began to walk to Amir's side. "You are postponing the inevitable," Destrian said as he walked lazily past his brother, who stood frozen, unable to think or speak. "Ah!" he exclaimed with a tone of pompous delight. "It seems that it has finally arrived." The roar of rushing wind was now right behind Amir. A shock of feeling shot through his body and allowed him to briskly spin around. Before him stood a gray wall of wind that resembled the wall of a tornado. It stretched infinitely into the sky, blocking all light from behind it, and indefinitely to the sides, creating a slightly concave shape. The surface was moving, but seemed almost solid, for it did not emit any wind itself. "This is the chaos inhibiting your mind, Amir," cried Destrian with an air of triumph. "You have found the eye of the storm but for a moment. But the tempest of dismay will always find its way to you. There is no running. You have lost, brother. Step into your madness. Return to yourself in the present." Amir recalled the feeling of the present, the endless toils through pain, and his imminent defeat. A feeling of melancholy washed over his body, weakening all emotions but the feeling of defeat. Rivers of blood still ran from the rose, which once bound Amir into happiness, but now served as a harbinger of his end. The foot, which felt heavy, now moved forward with ease towards the storm. "Splendid," smiled Destrian. "Only when you accept the present may you have a future. Return to your world and surrender, and there may be a bright future to look forward to." The words meant nothing to Amir. He felt like a hollow puppet, moving in accordance to his master. Once at the wall of chaos, and beside his hated brother, he stopped and stared into the infinite whirling hell below him. Now it's time, Amir. Return to the world and revel in your madness. There was nothing left to do. Amir accepted that. He felt a sense of solemn belonging within the darkness ahead, so he stepped forward. Reaching his hand and gently pushing into the winds, he could feel only a cold breeze. A sense of belonging now washed over his melancholy, and he was now fully accepting of his fate. Perhaps I was never meant to win, whispered Amir. Perhaps I was simply pushing against my fate. It seemed that some things a man cannot change, no matter how great the efforts he puts forth are. The end is the end, and I must accept it with the scraps of dignity and honor that I have left. This is it, Destrian. This is the end. You, my profoundly loathed hyena of a brother, you finally win.
Amir!
The voice of Catherine interrupted the final goodbyes of his last cherished memory.
You made me a promise.
Amir pulled back and turned with a grimace. My promise no longer stands, for you have broken your own, he cried, making a disdainful gesture that sent a splash of blood from the rose that landed in the time-frozen grass that seemed to gradually lose its green color. Tears began to build on the eyes of the previously beloved.
What are you saying?
She uttered, with an inflection that caused Amir's eyes to conjure a similar glisten to hers.
You are here, with me. You stood before me, an undefeated champion, a triumphant leader, and my beloved husband. Why do you leave me?
Amir shot a glance at Destrian, who stood smiling arrogantly.
He does not belong here. This place is a sanctuary for us and us alone. Do not forsake the last place that he did not destroy. This is not the eye of the storm. This is the peak of the mountain that projects above the clouds of peril below. This is the place where the sun may always shine and the stars may always dance. Will you step from heaven simply at the request of someone that time and time again has attempted to purge your happiness?
The softness of her tone filled Amir with a fond warmth he felt prior to the arrival of Destrian, who let out a most abominable laugh. How pathetic, he boomed with a heavy chuckle. By that composed look, I can assure that you may actually be considering what it tells you. Taking advice from a fragment of your past. First you take refuge in your memory. Now you actually consider its advice. Your noxious impudence is downright appalling. She is right, whispered Amir solemnly, staring into the bleeding rose. She's right, you say? Exclaimed Destrian carelessly. She is not real. In reality, she is my wife. In reality, she has betrayed you. In reality, you were vanquished by my hand. You cannot turn from reality. If you truly believe her, stay in this wretched asylum. Turn away and postpone reality. But in time, the corrosive madness will consume everything. The wicked grin on Destrian's face slowly began to fade as he recognized a faint laughter coming from Amir, who stood looking down at the rose that lay bleeding in his hand. The entire time, began Amir, talking through a light fit of laughter, I thought this madness could help me. But I see everything now. The blood which dripped from his hand stopped, and the blood which ran from the rose began to wrap a smooth cocoon over it. You took everything from me. You took my future. You took my present. And all I have left is my past. There is beauty in it. Such grand beauty. Each moment a spectacle that bolsters my resolve. You know that this is over, shouted Destrian with agitation. Give up. There is nothing you can do. I have already won. The blood formed a solid cocoon, which began to resemble the grip of a sword. The skin on his hand suddenly fissured, and began to flow with a black ichor that gradually covered the solidifying blood of the rose. You have no victory here. This is the only thing you cannot take away from me. The blood quickly formed the curved guard and quillins that shot straight into a long and thin blade. The darkness seeping from his hand moved just as quickly to cover the entirety of the glistening black. When the entire rapier became dark, the wounds on Amir's hand closed up instantly, while his hand clenched the grip. I no longer require this impure madness that you infected my mind with. The warm embrace of my past consoles me, filling me with a supreme purity. This sacred place of unfathomable splendor has no refuge for tainted thoughts and memories. This place is mine and mine alone. He began to walk slowly towards Destrian, sword in hand, and a kind smile across his face. Not the smile of one about to kill a hated enemy, but rather the smile of one in the action of finishing a long project, the smile of transcending a new chapter in one's life. You are gravely mistaken, cried Destrian, clearly disquieted by the notion, as he stumbled backwards, pressing his back against the gray wall. If you kill me, your mind will collapse. There is no victory for you in this. Amir gazed into Destrian's bewildered eyes with a light chuckle. There was never going to be a victory. There was only an impure mind, and now it will be purged. In an instant, the black blade impaled Destrian. The gray wall began to slowly consume Destrian, as the blood began to run from the blade lodged in his chest. You were always an unruly child, uttered Destrian, along with a rough cough that sent streams of blood from his lips. And still you push against your fate. So be it. Amir turned the blade in the wound, and in an instant, the blood and dark ichor that comprised the sword liquefied and shot into Destrian's chest, leaving only a wooden rose in Amir's hand. Wide cracks of iridescent crimson began to extend their roots from the wound of the body and then to the wall of the gray winds. And with a sudden explosion, the dreaded storm that wreaked misery and havoc in Amir's mind for so long exploded into nothingness. A stream of bright lights cascaded over the infinite fields of Amir's consciousness, restoring color to the dancing grasses and rewarming Amir's chilled skin with a warm, caressing breeze. Destrian stumbled backwards until his back hit the massive trunk of the oak. You may have conquered your mind, he uttered dryly through a rough and heavy cough, but destiny will prevail. It is impossible to avoid the inevitable. Amir looked up, squinting at the bright blue sky, which, restored to its original colors, seemed to greet him with arms of fluffy white. Fate, destiny, impossible, inevitable. I suppose you are too dense to realize. When I have such fervent joy such as this, nothing is set in stone. I am the pinnacle of mental fortitude. My body and mind have united to an extent out of your comprehension. Nothing can hinder my plan any longer. Not you, not fate. I can no longer be defeated as long as... He turned with a smile to see Catherine match the jubilant expression. As long as I am here with you. And with those words, Destrian's body turned into dust, which was immediately carried away by the breeze. Nothing can detain us now. We have a dance to attend. The reunited lovers of a world long past stared deeply into each other's eyes, and, with one more blink the rustling of the canopy in the light breeze of Amir's memories dissipated. But as the present world restored itself, he could still feel the warmth and joy of his mind. Chapter 4. Dance of Blood. The eyes opened to face a marble floor glimmering with red. Amir's disarmed hands were pressed tightly against the edge of the table for balance. The cloth around his wounds was still wet. A long sword and a rapier slept on the ground under a blanket of blood and were crossed in the middle of the blade. It was clear that Amir was only gone for a moment. Destrian's voice suddenly boomed and tore through the silence. "That lethargic pose is doubtless the sign of your defeat. Now, follow Owen to Dr. Prinwick. You may yet survive this." A sensation of pure ecstasy rushed through Amir's veins. Each pump from the heart made his body feel increasingly weightless, and grew a grin that almost felt foreign to his face. "Magnificent!" exploded Amir, facing the ceiling, arms open and fingers crooked. The insanity in his voice was profound enough to make an asylum nurse shudder. Destrian made a confused gesture while simultaneously gripping the rapier and dagger cautiously. "Splendid, marvelous, sublime!" he cried in a colossally ecstatic tone, as his body contorted backwards into a crescent, arms spread fully. The blood which dripped from the ceiling rolled down the walls, and the residual puddles on the floor began to conglomerate into small spheres. "The pinnacle of human physical form, mind and body interconnected to perfection, a most sacred gift." Destrian cast an unsure smile and spoke again. "Seems you have plunged deeper into madness. Even if you suddenly acquired some further combat prowess, your current wounds will exsanguinate your body momentarily." Amir bent his body into place and looked back at the scattered cuts on his arm which bled slowly. "The wounds of the past you allude to are no more." The bleeding suddenly ceased from the wounds, including the deep cuts in his abdomen, and began to close. As the wounds shut completely, the small red spheres of blood which decorated all surfaces in the room simultaneously formed into rose petals and began to slowly fall one by one. And like a daydreamer under a shedding cherry blossom, Amir inhaled blissfully the sweet aroma of nature's sweetness. Destrian, unbeknownst to all the imagined figments and sensations, stared at the closed wounds, shuddering in disbelief. "That is impossible," cried Destrian, stumbling back, but quickly catching his balance. "Oh, my dear brother, my dear ignorant brother, you understand nothing of possibility. Due to your cruel transgressions, a being was born, a being of purity that transcends the boundaries and limitations of humans. A hallowed being, unaffected by fate and immune to the preordained. A beautiful being of perfection itself." Destrian peered forward with an expression that a wolf assumes when approached by another pack. "I have not a clue as to how you acquired such an attribute," he said, moderating his tone to conceal his daunted spirit. "But it cannot save you from a blade plunged into your heart or reattach a severed head." "Ah!" exclaimed Amir as he grabbed his rapier from a pile of petals. "Indeed it cannot. But that may never occur. One does not keep a life buoy in their home because they do not fear drowning there, just as I do not fear a lethal attack from you, and your threats mean nothing to me." The remark made Destrian grit his teeth. "If you believe that closing wounds is the only attribute I gained, you're gravely mistaken. My cleansed mind has full control over all bodily faculties. It allows me to focus any sense to heighten its prowess to an extraordinary level." Destrian made a temperamental slash at the air. Enough of your hogwash. I will not be daunted by empty words.
Very well, then. I shall have to show you what it feels like to be beaten. You will learn, like I once did, the meaning of ultimate defeat.
With the phrase spoken, Amir began to walk slowly towards Destrian, with a swagger that could make a tempered pugilist quake, but showed no effect on Destrian's frame. Pick up your blade, Amir.
There is no need. In fact, I need not to use a sword at all. I'm simply holding this blade to reward you for the last duel, and not an instant slaughter. After all, I would not feel so magnificent at this time without your aid.
The surge of arrogance pushed Destrian over the edge, and caused his teeth to grind under a furious grimace. Silence! I shall not take any more of this foolishness. He spat and sprung into a brisk charge. Amir stopped, pointing his sword forward, focusing his mind on sight and hearing, switching between the two at a rate that gave him a perfect outline of Destrian's movements and balance, while sensing even the minutest movements of his surroundings. The approach of his opponent appeared slow. Each step revealed 1,000 openings that were unapparent in the past. A wave of confidence pushed Amir forward to intercept the indomitable force. With a sure smile, he tossed the rapier to his left hand and waited for the attack. Destrian lunged, sending the tip of his rapier at Amir's heart.
Aiming to kill, I see,
Amir said calmly as his hand veered and the back of his hand met with the side of the blade, parrying it gently with his flesh. The swing of the dagger was parried effortlessly with the rapier in his left hand, and Amir took a step close. And with the most gentle and patronizing motion, he tapped the forehead of Destrian in a similar manner to that of a father and son in a play fight. This sudden psychological inhibition petrified Destrian. And just as the light thud echoed off the walls, the shackles of gravity and human speech seemed to be stripped from Amir as he dashed back faster than any animal, turned his body around, and delivered a powerful kick to the ribs that sent an explosion of petals skyward. The loud thud, light crunch, and a painful grunt made Catherine and Owen shudder, while conversely putting a satisfied grin on Amir's face. The impact sent Destrian flying into a chair and tumbling over the table like a lifeless rag doll.
"And now your ignorance is shed," shouted Amir boastfully. "Now you understand what it feels like to be helpless, to feel destroyed, to lose."
Destrian let out a painful growl as he stood up holding his broken ribs. "I have not lost yet," he uttered in a most frustrated yet solemn manner. "I have underestimated your newfound speed, but now you underestimate me."
Strong words for such a frail and meager vessel.
Amir's eyes suddenly squinted and shot a focused glare at the door.
"Someone's here," he said in a serious tone. 4, 5 heavy steps. Not royal guards. Officers? Yes, it must be a group of officers.
A smile came back to his face as his eyes darted back to Destrian, grabbing the rapier from the floor and the dagger from the table.
"It seems that company has arrived, so they'll be breaking down the door soon enough. Let us finish this promptly. Show me your skill in earnest."
"I intend to." Destrian flipped the rapier into a reverse grip in his left hand, and the dagger in regular grip in his right. "I have not taken this stance in a long time," he grumbled as he slowly climbed over the table and assumed a low stance, pointing his dagger forward and keeping the rapier low and parallel with the floor.
"Ah!" exclaimed Amir with excitement. "The notorious low fox. A last resort stance you reserved for most difficult of duels. I have personally never witnessed it, but I know it to be a fierce and unpredictable stance. I can't help but feel honored to face it myself."
"You may patronize me, but it will not matter soon. The words uttered were too solemn for Amir to continue with his pleasantries. "Very well," shouted Amir in a grand voice. "Let the dance of blood commence." And with a gesture of readiness, Amir tossed the rapier into his right hand, and placing the left hand behind him, assumed a reactive stance. Destrian answered with a low lunge, and thus the final battle began. The first clash of metal exploded in a shower of petals, bolstering the beauty of battle for Amir, but conversely, for the unseeing eye, it seemed but a regular block. A low swing came from the rapier to clip the hamstring, but Amir effortlessly jumped over the attack. Due to the lack of impact, Destrian's body rotated and slashed high with the dagger. Amir answered by hitting the bottom of his wrist with his left hand, sending the dagger flying. But, despite his superior speed, Destrian's raw combat prowess compensated for his lack of superhuman swiftness. As the dagger ascended, Destrian used his free hand to grab Amir's forearm, pulled, and delivered a powerful shoulder check that sent him reeling back. Immediately after the impact, Destrian plucked the dagger from the air and began to turn his body for the next attack, so to not lose momentum. Warping his body, he threw 2 overhand slashes, both of which were passively parried. "My turn!" shouted Amir as he began a careless flurry of attacks that sent a hailstorm of petals. The pelting of hits did not seem to daunt Destrian in the slightest. He reeled calmly, parrying the attacks that he could, sustaining only minor cuts. A strong attack aimed for the chest came suddenly. He reacted not by moving, but allowing the blade to cut through the side of his ribcage. The deliberate acceptance of damage allowed him to slash his rapier at the throat of his opponent. Amir bent his neck to avoid the slash, only to receive a thrust from the dagger. A further bend of the neck avoided the dagger, but it seemed that this was the exact setup Destrian planned for. Raw speed and power can veer a body in an instant, but it does not allow for joints to safely move past their limits set by tendons and ligaments. Amir lacked the foresight to avoid this constraint. His head pressed tightly against his shoulder, but could not move back. Destrian took the opportunity he created to strike with his elbow. With a loud and powerful thud, a blow split the skin of Amir's cheekbone and sent him reeling back towards a pillar behind. Without allowing his heart to pump a drop of blood left unused, he leaped forward and swung with both hands simultaneously. Destrian put faith in the momentary lack of balance, but Amir managed to slip past the attack, unfazed by the gash on his face that slowly closed without bleeding. The 2 rapiers smashed into the granite, emitting a deafening clank and sending out a shower of shrapnel that Amir could only perceive as glossed petals. Truth was, Amir could have ended the trifling battle at any moment, but he relished the feeling of keeping up with Destrian. He reveled in knowing that at any moment he could take Destrian's life, despite his foretold destiny. But there was nothing to keep him from toying with his prey. He reeled back about 10 feet and waited for an attack. Destrian kicked the pillar and spun around, shooting himself at his opponent. With a sure movement, he tossed the rapier forward to distract Amir and took to the air. Amir parried the incoming blade and watched as Destrian ascended into a flying axe kick. "Perhaps I'll take your leg," he exclaimed, overflowing with joy and raising his rapier to block the attack, but Destrian was 1 step ahead. He placed the side of his dagger under his knee, the place that Amir was aiming to cut, and swung with his leg down with utmost power. Because Amir parried the throw, he raised the dagger to block too swiftly to control the impact, and the blade went up and shot back down with even greater force. The more Amir attempted to stabilize the block, the harder the blade bent until it finally gave out and whipped past the leg. The muscles in Amir's upper torso activated immediately to block as much damage as possible. Destrian's heel smashed between the shoulder and the neck, sending out a fleshy thud that made Catherine and Owen cringe and shudder. Although the muscles nullified most of the force, a whiplash took Amir's head and neck, causing his ears to ring and eyes to blur. The joy of battle he felt was sullied by the mild annoyance of miscalculation. Destrian, after delivering what he thought was a devastating hit, reeled back to catch his breath and conjure his next attack. Amir stretched his neck so nonchalantly, one may have thought it was simply to quell a sore muscle rather than unclench damaged muscles. Destrian quickly realized this grand attack delivered only a minuscule amount of damage. And as for Amir, the eyesight and hearing regained its sharpness. A series of soft clicks coming from beyond the massive door caught his attention. They're setting up to open, he thought to himself. If they're using a ram, it might take them a few minutes to open. If a wedge, perhaps 10. I thought I would like the word with Catherine before I depart. So I suppose I'll finish it now. But I will not bestow on him the gift of knowledge. I want to see him cower in fear of the unexpected. Destrian looked up involuntarily and assumed the low fox, while Amir looked down to see that he was standing in a small puddle of his own blood, which, to him, was a pile of petals that emanated a most delightful scent. He put one foot out of the puddle and rubbed the tip of his boot against the floor until it regained its grip, while the rest was slick with ichor. The two stood frozen, like statues in a storm of petals, a beautiful and most auspicious sight for Amir, and a most dreadful obstacle for his brother. The tension became too palpable for Destrian to stomach. He bit his lip, breaking under the pressure. But when he could no longer hold the stance, his legs began to move on their own. Amir carefully watched as Destrian's foot pressed against the floor and pushed him forward. But as the leg began to leave the floor, he reacted. All energy focused on the leg that Amir pushed with the tip of his boot. With a speed even more incredible than before, he used the blood which covered the soles to slide sideways towards his prey. A thrill of true, profound fear shot through Destrian's body, for when Amir was right in front of him, he had not completed his first step. His body would not match this inconceivable speed. Only his thoughts could take the blunt damage of terror itself. All energy was reallocated to the arm with the rapier, and with two swift motions, Amir had disarmed both hands. The blade pointed at Amir's heart and froze for a moment, just in front of the rib cage. The castle was sieged, and the Red King's life-giving contractions turned into quivers of terror. Amir took his tiny fraction of a second to look into the eyes of his brother, his rival, and his most hated enemy. For years, dreams of this moment replayed in his weary mind. He drew his most penetrating gaze and stared, soaking, bathing in the most intense fear one's eyes could display. He searched his emotions to activate the most appropriate reaction for such a sublime moment. A feeling of the most unearthly happiness enveloped him. The physical and emotional sensations seemed to be of Providence itself. He could feel his soul sing and reach out to the heavens in jubilant revelry. And as his hands pushed forward to ultimate victory, a victory over all odds, a victory over his destiny, the hand of God himself seemed to reach out and envelop his body in a divine light. The warm light blocked all senses and confined Amir in his mind. So, this is the embrace of God, he thought. I refuse to fully believe that God could allow such betrayal. Yet, there he is now, granting me a most sublime feeling. Yes, this cannot be of human conjuring. God himself must be rewarding me for my torment. I thank you deeply. My faith has been doubtless restored. I can accept this newfound piety. But I must now ask a final favor. Withdraw your light, so I may finish my enemy, so I may end the life for the sins he has committed.
I shall deliver your sacred justice on the wicked. My vengeance and your judgment are intertwined. Allow me this action, and I will be forever yours."
And just as the thought passed his mind, the light dissipated. His blade was an inch away from impact when the corner of his eye spotted something different about the gate. He shot an instantaneous glare to find that the doors were wide open, and a massive black cloud of smoke stood in the middle.
"How?"
his mind shouted, as it produced a focus intense enough to see the air bend around the doors. He could see a wave of air and debris approach, lifting chairs and pedals in a tsunami of chaos. His arms reacted to defend, but even with his new extraordinary abilities, were, alas, only human. The wave lifted him and Destrian, sending them flying towards the back of the room. Amir closed his eyes to shield them from the tiny shards of wood and stone and attempted to catch his balance in the air, but the wave tumbled his body with monstrous force. He felt that he was airborne for far too long. The impact felt imminent, and though he could not feel whether he was facing the ground or floating upside down, he clenched all of his muscles and braced. The impact hit the back of his head. Amir could feel his brain pressed tightly against the skull. There was no way to defend, no way to react. He was utterly helpless. And as the brain began to bounce, all consciousness was lost, and Amir fell into a deep, infinite darkness of sleep. Some time passed. To Amir, it felt as though it could have been a second, or a week. There was no telling for certain. Consciousness was restored in a flood of pain that seemed to tear his brain in two.
"Pain?"
his mind asked itself, attempting to reform the shattered state. The pain that filled his cuts and bruises seemed to radiate nostalgia and confusion alike. His eyes opened to a blurry and spinning sight of him sitting against a wall, legs straight, his wounds reopened and bleeding. His ears rang with a piercing shriek, but began to slowly pick up other sounds. "Kill Destrian and capture Catherine. Leave Owen, we have no quarrels with him," a man's rough voice commanded. "As for him, he wiped out most of the guards. Take him in for interrogation." Amir's eyes sluggishly rose to see 5 men standing at the place of the doors. They wore black, well-fitting uniforms and looked more apt for sneaking rather than fighting. The man in the middle held a curved sword, which seemed to be something between a scimitar and a bastard sword. The 2 men beside him aimed their carbines at Destrian, while the 2 beside those, with a steel kopis and a small buckler that covered only up to their wrists. Among the sea of debris, Owen was sprawled and unconscious, seemingly unhurt, but covered by a sheet of wooden shards. Catherine remained behind the pillar, hiding from the blast. Meanwhile, Destrian stood a few yards from Amir, unscathed from the blast and solemn with resignation. "And which Synesian assassins might you be?" he inquired with an air impossibly calm for a situation so dire. "We are the Lamenting," answered the man in an angry tone. "Ready your arms. Any last words?" Destrian took a deep breath and gave a melancholy smile. "You have saved me from a death, only to condemn me to it. How laughable my end becomes. Since I should be dead, I have nothing to say, for the dead cannot speak. If I die, I will go with my own dignity and honor. Go on, fire away." The last words were uttered with a weak and wretched tone that indicated the acceptance of ultimate defeat. This display should have invoked a grand happiness for Amir, but he felt nothing. He could feel the pain of his wounds, the aching brain, the confusion caused by the lack of hatred and emotion he felt. "Very well. Fire!" As the words passed Amir's ears, his body sprang up, almost on its own and bolted to Destrian. At the first step, he picked up a rapier from its repose on the floor, and on the second, a chunk of table sufficiently large to cover the head and upper torso. The crack of gunpowder reached Amir's ringing ears just as his body stopped in front of his brother. The shock of 2 bullets almost knocked him down, but he threw the chunk of wood aside to retain balance.
"He is for me to kill," groaned Amir emotionlessly. "And you will not capture me. Leave us both or fight."
"So be it," answered the man. "Kill them both." Amir and the men armed with kopades started at each other at once. The control Amir had over his body was gone, but his new opponent seemed to be rather sluggish, even for an exhausted and tattered vindicator. He tore through the assassins in 2 whirling motions. The men that were busy reloading dropped their carbines at the sight of their comrades being slaughtered before them, and each pulled out a small dagger. With a similar motion, Amir cut through the 2 men and reached the final one. "You impudent pest!" the man shouted as he leaped forward, swinging his blade with both hands. Amir blocked a powerful overhead swing and directed its force to the floor. As the blade clanked against the marble, Amir kicked the knee, breaking it and sending the man on his other knee with a cry of pain. But before he could take another breath, Amir flew past him and landed a deep cut into his throat. Realizing the imminent death, the man fell back and let the blood flow calmly without allowing it to enter his lungs. Amir turned around with such lethargy that Destrian thought he might fall over. His head was spinning, his vision impaired. Mental and physical exhaustion, mingled with a dull but strong pain, caused his eyelids to droop and beg for closure in sleep. The pain should have felt new, since it was the first time he felt it in a long time, but it seemed to be all too mundane. The fresh blood seeped through the drying blood in his clothes, sapping the energy with every pump of the heart. "Now, let's finish this once and for all," said Amir with utmost tranquility. The words had not even the slightest undertone of anger. At this moment he felt nothing but obligation. His body moved unfueled by anger, but rather by the lack of fulfillment he felt. He felt it was his duty to kill Destrian, and this was the only fuel that coursed through his veins. "I have lost, but you will not kill me," replied Destrian, retaining the sorrowful air of defeat. "Take your blade and fight." The words began to slur as the eyelids turned to lead. "And if you will not, I will execute you where you stand." "You will not, for you haven't the sufficient strength to walk 5 steps towards me." Amir knew that he was right. Blood was quickly draining. His body was far past its limit, yet still he took a step forward. "Amir, I have already conceded your victory. I will not apologize for what I have done to you, but I will admit my defeat. Now rest. Your goal has been met. You win." The words were solemn and held no wickedness. They were sincere, but in a strangely cold way, heartfelt. Amir attempted to speak, but his mouth failed him. An effort to take another step was instantly thwarted by the immovable muscles. The room began to spin more and more, and any fire left in his heart faded. The rapier slipped from his fingers as his legs finally gave out, and the eyes which showed so much vengeance were now lifeless. His weary eyelids closed slowly, and the tormented soul that twisted for so long with a most singular vindictive malice was at length quelled. Chapter 5. The Count of Benedetto. 3 weeks passed after the incident. After the fall of Amir, Destrian was immediately treated for 3 broken ribs, minor cuts, and a major bodily overexertion. Catherine was greatly disturbed by the brutal event and asked for a 3-week excursion to unwind, the idea of which Destrian endorsed instantly. While Catherine left de Coursenel, a tropical city in the southwest of Marinus, bordering the Sea of Medallions and only 15 leagues from Silesia, Destrian rested with the help of tonics and assortments of medical herbs burning in censers around the reading room, prescribed and recommended by Dr. Prinwick. 3 weeks have passed, and Catherine's travel stagecoach pulled up to the manor at noon. Destrian's eyes lazily tore from the book and fixed themselves on the carriage which he could see approach from the window on the second-floor reading room. A scented smoke cloud of marigold, mingled with dozens of other burning herbs, floated past his face as he reached for the decanter of papaya extract mixed with wine and poured a half-pint into a chalice. Upon entering the tall foyer, with its decorated milky walls and massive brass chandelier hanging overhead, Catherine was greeted by 2 rows of bowing servants and 4 royal guardsmen standing solemnly on each side. No one paid mind to the brown travel pants and tan waistcoat that contradicted her usual feminine dresses and ornaments, but a few whispers on the topic followed as she quitted the hall. With a smile, she proceeded into the empty ballroom. The scent of home seemed to bring back pleasant memories, for her smile melted into a nostalgic smirk. After a slow sequence of soft taps from a staircase, Destrian appeared behind her with his regular blue evening gown and slippers. The robe connected at the middle of the chest, revealing a few layers of medical wrap around his ribs. His face drew an expression of warm welcoming, while the eyes showed his weariness. "It has been 3 weeks already?" he asked with an air of careless sarcasm.
"Indeed it has. And have you not counted every day since your love has been away?" she inquired with an equally sarcastic tone, bolstering the casually jubilant atmosphere. "The difficulty of counting has redoubled due to my inactive state. I have been absorbed in the most dreadful and tedious meditations. Even my dreams have been less than pleasant." The words were uttered with more solemnity than Catherine seemed to expect. In an attempt to sustain the joyful atmosphere, she ran and embraced Destrian in her arms. "Gah!" he cried out painfully. "Careful now. Your embrace resembles that of a lion." Catherine drew back with a look of mild contempt. "But the look of Aphrodite herself." The words were pronounced with rigid force, similar to that of a fake compliment given by a crass man that wishes to grab a woman's attention. The ill-concealed lack of feeling in Destrian's eyes began to match the eyes of Catherine, which seemed to be exhausted from holding their facade, and dropped their loving glare. "Yes," blurted Catherine awkwardly,
breaking eye contact and sending it to the white marble floor.
"It seems that you have bolstered your defenses."
"Ah, you've noticed. Our new guards should aid us in mending the treacherous aura this place seems to seep. The servants have redecorated the dining hall into something splendidly cozy to help remedy our unpleasant memories."
"And rather unpleasant memories they are. Perhaps we could both leave the house for some time? A hunting expedition to Borgonier Forest?"
The request made Destrian ponder for a moment. "Have you not had your fill hunting at Coursenel?"
"Small game does not give me the rush I am looking for. And after all, the air of the forest will help mend your wounds."
"Perhaps you're right. My body is longing for something to do. To hell with Prinwick's prescriptions. My body and mind are rotting here."
"So it's settled then,"
cheered Catherine, clapping her hands.
"Shall we leave on the morrow?"
"No," he shouted as his hand pulled back his greasy hair. "I cannot reside within this wretched place any longer. Let us leave at 4.
"So much the better."
"Unless you wish to stay here for the night."
No. Your plan sinks to be a most anticipative melody." Procure your arms, and I will gather up my collection.
Yes, of course. Shall I command for a larger carriage? A travel wagon, perhaps?
Without a doubt. Pray go. We will meet at the carriage at 4.
Oh, one more thing before we go.
Yes?
An aura of solemnity suddenly overpowered the revelry. Any word from Owen? Or did he decide to avoid contact?
Ah, that. Yes, on the road back I stopped by his apartment in Pinar.
And was Owen able to speak to him?
Yes, his apartment was only a couple of leagues away from Lampress Manor. Owen visits him regularly, and on his visits he recalled the new Count of Benedetto is less repulsed by his new lifestyle than we previously thought. He assures that we'll face no resistance from him.
No resistance from that monstrosity? One could only hope. And although I cannot take Owen's word with certainty, I cannot dwell on the past either. In any case, we should forget about that incident. We should forget about him.
Certainly.
I have no other inquiries to detain us. Let us get ourselves ready for the trip. The two exchanged unsure smiles and split, Catherine making her way up the stairs, and the latter to command his servants to prepare the new carriage. The two seemed over their past, but their past dwelled only 5 leagues away, in Lampress Manor. The past that seemed so insidious to Destrian's mind, for every time he took part in the calming meditation, his body would arouse with a quick convulsion. The past which renamed, or rather branded, the title, Count of Benedetto. A sound of knocking echoed through the empty, undecorated halls of Lampress Manor. At length, a knock on the door of the second-floor library followed. Yes, inquired a lethargic reader, facing the window. The door opened, and a female servant stepped in.
Owen Farsand is here to see you. Shall I dismiss him once more?
He groaned as his legs pushed his tattered body and stood up facing the servant. His skin was riddled with half-healed cuts, and bandages over his chest made palpable ridges through his tight satin robe. It has been weeks. I believe it's time to speak. I can no longer deter him. Send him into the drawing room. I will join him after a change of attire. The servant bowed and left, closing the door behind her. Owen was ushered into the drawing room shortly after. Dressed in a light overcoat that's brown finish contrasted the dark blue formal trousers and shining blue leather shoes, Owen took a seat in a red velvet divan, which stood across from an identical divan beyond a small, undecorated table. The room was only comprised of those 3 pieces of furniture. A few minutes passed, and Amir entered, wearing a loose white satin blouse, black evening wear trousers, and black slippers. A strong scent of cologne filled the room. It was clear that bathing with so many wounds was a problem. "Amir!" exclaimed Owen, as he watched him sit on the other divan. "Owen," answered Amir apathetically.
"I am overjoyed to see you're alive. I began to think that I was lied to about your recovery."
"Yes, and as you can see, I am intact."
"I must know what happened. And how did you acquire this manor and title?" Destrian neglected to unveil anything to me, so I must now ask you myself.
Amir looked up in meditation, gathering his thoughts. "I will not forget your betrayal." The statement made the hairs on Owen's neck shoot up. It was clear that he hoped to avoid the subject. "However, I understand your decision. Your scruple was erased by the overbearing feeling of imminent defeat. You tried to aid me, and I needed you most to stop me. Your decision was not as wrong as I previously felt. So, I will reveal all to you." Owen breathed out a tension that built itself in the moment and leaned back against the soft cushion.
"Yes, tell me all. I long to hear this mystery unfurled."
"Very well. To put it shortly, you were knocked unconscious by the blast, which was set up by Senesian assassins. I lost my newfound speed and bodily control in the blast, but was able to defeat the assassins, so I may kill Destrian myself. After finishing the last one, the loss of blood which began to flow again after the blast began to take its toll, and I collapsed just as Destrian admitted his defeat. I woke in a private home clinic of Dr. Prinwick. He told me that I slumbered for 3 days, but I should make a full recovery. He handed me a letter which was written by Destrian. In short, the letter said that I am granted a fake identity and a past. I am now a wealthy count that goes by the name of Armin Lemmings and owns the island of Benedetto off the coast of Idmin. This count finally settled just outside Pinar in Lampress Manor. I was given 1,000,000 mares in an account with Hobson and Fletch, a promise of 200,000 mares per annum, servants, and a new life with the freedom to go or move where I please in exchange for keeping the past a secret, never making contact with loyalty, and assimilating to my new life. I suppose this was the only way Destrian could keep his pride after his defeat.
"Hard to imagine that Destrian could act so well in defeat,"
uttered Owen with a bewildered air. "Indeed, his pride is a double-edged sword."
"As much for him as it is for you."
The comment made Amir's eyes sparkle with a mild surprise. "So it seems you have noticed."
"It was not hard to. You toyed with Destrian like a cat with its captive prey. And the same pride that allowed you to turn the tides of the fight was used to reverse it in the end."
"You are doubtless correct. My downfall was my fault alone. But look what it acquired me. If I had killed Destrian in the beginning, slain the assassins, and escaped, what could I gain? Catherine betrayed me. You would not aid me. The country would not sympathize with a murderer, even if it was for revenge. I would run from the law until I am caught or dead. And if luck was on my side, I could escape the country and make my life working as the rest of the commoners. Not that it's something I fear, but in contrast to what I have gained, it is hard to feel disdain for this new life. I am rich, free from responsibilities of Marinian royalty, free from the toils of the commoners, and free from the horrors of living a destitute life. I have a life that anyone prefers above all else. I won." A melancholy smile stretched across the wound-ridden cheeks. "The only dagger that remains in my heart is Catherine's betrayal. I lack understanding on the topic. She was my most trusted ally, and so simply she allowed me to rot in that dungeon? Did she feel no remorse? Was she holding doubts against me from the beginning?"
"That, my friend, I have no answer to,"
replied Owen, shaking his head with resignation. "Perhaps I should not dwell on it. Perhaps I should just live with this live wound and find happiness and fulfillment by finding someone else. Starting anew could mend the wound, or at least mask the pain."
"Yes, happiness awaits, Amir. You have all the resources to acquire happiness that you deserve. The rest is up to you. Forget about your past and begin anew."
Owen's words were pure and genuine. His beneficent gaze gave Amir a warm feeling of hope for an auspicious future and melted the reclusive shell that grew over him in the 3 weeks of seeing only servants. "You speak with such benevolence for a leg stabber." Owen let out a hearty laugh as the melancholy aura turned to light-hearted joy.
Even after all this, you retain your sense of humor. It truly goes to show the strength of us humans.
Indeed it does. The two sat quietly for a moment, locking their eyes to the granite tiles that made the floor.
Well,
Owen broke the silence.
It has been a pleasure to speak with you again. But to say with honesty, I was not expecting an audience from you today. Your home is on the way to the racetrack, and I was headed there now. I will be late if I do not depart now.
Ah, the racetrack. Conesian Park, if my memory serves.
That's the place. Ah,
he exclaimed as he sprung to his feet and grabbed a small envelope out of his pants pocket and handed it to Amir. And what might this be?
A courier that seemed of neither civil nor royal affiliation asked me today to deliver this to you.
And what reason would he have for not delivering it to me himself?
I pondered that myself. Perhaps he is afraid that you would recognize him? Well, in any case, would you like to accompany me to the race?
As Amir opened his mouth to accept the invitation, his hands tore through the letter and his eyes read. The words were instantly stifled and his heart dropped to his feet. We will have to postpone it for another time. I have something I must do. An air of worry passed over Owen's face.
What did it say?
He asked, but Amir's indescribable expression told all.
Very well. I hope to see you again, sooner rather than later. Adieu, my friend.
Farewell, Owen. Owen bowed, which served as a token of farewell, as well as respect, and left solemnity, while Amir seated himself and pondered over the letter. He stared at the small piece of paper, which read, "Go to the place you always escape to." The words were written in an unrefined writing style that indicated the use of an opposite writing hand. The sentence was too plainly put for Amir to recognize the writer. It was clear that someone knew about the oak tree that he resided at in times of distress. It can only be one of three people, he thought to himself. Owen, Catherine, and Destrian. Owen is too genuine and cowardly to take the initiative of any plan, so it cannot be him. Catherine abandoned me and married Destrian out of free will, and would be far too ashamed to speak to me now. The only one that might have any reason to call me that far into the countryside is Destrian, and it would be to assassinate me. The notion bounced around his mind, making it difficult to think clearly. He shot a scrupulous gaze at the letter once more. Perhaps he is tired of holding me as a liability, and wants to end this once and for all. I will most likely arrive to an ambush. It is clear that he wants me to die away from my new home, to cause least commotion. I know better than to blindly follow this note. The thought settled in his mind, and his meditations became calm. No, he sighed deeply. I cannot run from it. If Destrian wants me dead, he will find a way. It is likely that he has set up spies to monitor my whereabouts, and I will be killed if I try to escape the country. And if I remain, I will in all probability be poisoned or killed in my sleep. Better I die fighting those scoundrels he hired, to die fighting. Amir reflected on the fight with Destrian, which seemed to be from a previous life. His hand ran down the valleys the blade inflicted on his face. He pondered at the rush it gave him to fight, but became dubious when the thought of killing sprang like a geyser of, to his surprise, repulsive emotions. Why would I kill others to gratify a death that I find most pleasing? A deep meditation washed over his mind. It matters not. I have acted selfishly in my revenge. What keeps me from prolonging that selfishness? God has turned away from me. and I from him. Is it so wrong that I kill to give myself just one more rush of life before it is extinguished? If those brigands he hired knew the extent of my anguish by the hand of their benefactor, they would lay down their lives in an instant. This last action cannot be done with remorse. I will die with dignity. As the final thought passed his head, he sprang up and called for a servant, ordering her to prepare him the most enduring horse in the stable. As for himself, Amir put on the finest waistcoat and trousers in his wardrobe. He stood, gazing in the mirror at the elegant red waistcoat and black buttons around which were embroidered halos of gold. The collar was superfluously popped to bolster the swagger of an attire which was complete with a marvelous pair of loose-fitting trousers and boots glimmering with a black sheen of leather. These preparations were doubtless made to leave a most splendid-looking corpse. As for the weapons, he grabbed 2 pistols, which resided untouched in the time of his arrival at the manor, loaded them, and placed them inside of the pocket of the waistcoat. For the blades, he grabbed 2 masterfully crafted rapiers, the scabbards of which he fastened on his belt on either side of his hips, with 2 small daggers and sheaths, which fastened to the back of his belt. A gray mare was prepared for Amir, who, without taking a single moment of respite, even saying goodbye to his servants, hopped on the saddle and rode off in a gallop. Once the horse became exhausted, Amir stopped at an inn and traded the beautiful mare for the best horse parked there. The rested horse's owner was more than happy to trade a mediocre horse for a gorgeous mare that transported the count to the inn. With the new horse, a brown stallion, Amir projected his arrival would be before sundown, which was of great importance to his mind, for an ambush was nearly impossible to combat in the dark. As the horse galloped into the countryside, Amir pondered the actions, continuing a most favorable outcome. He thought that if the battle was somehow won, he would be free from his assailants, who, in his mind, would be accompanied by the men that were ordered to follow him in case he attempts to escape. He would travel south to Tunisia and become a common worker. That life, though odious to think about at first, became more and more acceptable until Amir began to desire it. The desire propelled his mind into a state of readiness and lust for victory. As the sun was about to kiss the horizon, decorating the sky's clouds with a beautiful light crimson, like the glow of a flame, to the clear stones that would often adore a princess or a noblewoman during an evening ball, the horse peeked over a small hill, and Amir could see the great and lonely Colossus in the distance. Instantly his pupils dilated, and he began to run his eyes scrupulously over every minute crevice in the empty fields. His body tensed, ready to dodge any projectile, ready to fight a crowd of thugs. But, to his surprise, he arrived under the great canopy, untouched and alone. The rustling leaves above would have spiked a feeling of nostalgia if Amir had not been focusing entirely on checking every branch for enemies. After a moment of trotting around the tree, he dismounted and sighed in confusion. The land was void of animals as well as humans. He walked slowly around the tree, looking at the ground and trunk, expecting a trap or perhaps a message, but alas found nothing. With nothing left to do but ponder, he sat at the spot between 2 thick roots that he assumed during times of turmoil. And then he saw it, something shining at him from a small mound of stones about 100 feet away. In a fit of feverish curiosity, Amir sprung into a sprint. Leaving a cloud of dust behind him, he arrived at what seemed to be a small toy mirror between 2 stones, positioned in a way that only a person sitting between the 2 roots could see the reflection of the sky. Without letting a heartbeat go unused, Amir began to dig through the mound until his hand hit something wooden. At length he was holding a wooden lockbox that was about 1 foot long and a few inches wide. He pulled the metal clip over the keyhole in hopes that it was already unlocked, only to find that it indeed was. The box opened, and a letter folded many times resided inside. The set of anxious shaking hands unfolded the paper, and a pair of eyes, glowing with wonder, began racing with curiosity. The letter read the following:
To my love, Amir Farsend. I pondered the many ways that I could start this letter, but alas, I could not. So I will start it by apologizing, if I may. I realize that this apology may hold no weight yet, but grant me a chance and keep reading. I will begin at the inception of the nightmare. After your death, I was more than cynical. I woke in the crash, but saw neither you or Owen, nor Destrian. I saw a trail of blood in the direction of the manor. I did not know whether he was saving you or doing something despicable, so to find out for certain, I feigned an unconscious state, only to find Destrian return and cover the trail of blood. And after I was told that you have died, and flowed down the river never to be found again, I began to plot vengeance on your behalf. There was a chance that you were alive, and I had to find out. Although Destrian was dubious to trust me at first, I was able to seduce him by acting sorrowful and frail, effectively making him console my broken state. My fake feelings enabled me to gain his trust, and even his hand in marriage. After I was his wife, I never spoke against his decisions, despite the prejudice and evils that he allowed this country to create. At length, I gained enough of his trust to learn the whereabouts of you. It took all my strength and more to keep up my composure when I realized how long you have been down there with McGill and Wren. I knew who they were, and I knew exactly the unimaginable pain that they must have put you through. All I could do was remember our vows, our promises, our love, and agreed with his plans. After some time, I devised a plan. I asked him if you could be taken overseas to become a slave in the New World. He saw no downside to this plan and agreed. I planned to gather a crew of Senesian pirates, which I knew through groups of Senesian assassins that I was acquainted with in secrecy, and break you out during the voyage. We were to show the citizens of Marinus what Destrian has done, and he would doubtless be dethroned. Marinus will not stand for a lying, scheming leader, no matter his wittiness or leadership. But, alas, you pushed against not only Destrian's plan, but my plan as well. I was on the verge of breaking down when I saw you enter that dining hall. The feeling of pity mingled with the feeling of hopelessness enveloped me. But I remained composed because I knew that in the likelihood of your survival there, my plan would still be fulfilled. I prayed until my mind was exhausted and my soul was quivering. And there you were in the end, bleeding, barely alive, but a victor. As you may know, piety has never been my strength, but I prayed harder than I ever thought I could, and you, in the end, remained alive. The assassins, which I was never aware of, that barged into the dining hall must have planned an attack that night. They must have underestimated the amount of guards in the manor, because their numbers could never be sufficient. It was simply a stroke of luck that you cleared the way for them. This coincidence was almost comical, but in the end, it is what saved you from insanity, from murdering a king, and what kept my plan on track. If you are reading this on June 18th, I have left, or will on the morrow leave with Destrian on a hunting trip. On June 20th, I plan to venture into the woods and lose myself on purpose. While Destrian calls for a search party, I will arrive in Lampress Manor, hopefully finding you there. Owen would be too cowardly to help, so I never enlightened him. But not even he suspected me of betraying Destrian in the end. With your help, we will rile up the whole city and make sure that when Destrian returns to La Faronne, he will no longer be a king. He will pay for his transgressions, and we will do what we have dreamed of, uniting the people of Marinus and Silesia. We will win together. Now, to not arouse your emotions further, I will leave you with a loving farewell. Wait for me in Lampress Manor, and we will see each other yet again. With most heartfelt love, Catherine Farsend. P.S. Dig further. I have sufficient strength. It is your strength I now require.
Amir stared at the letter for minutes after he was through reading it, gathering his thoughts and emotions. A most singular form of happiness mingled with hopefulness was born. The feeling that trumped all the most profound emotions he had felt, or unnaturally created before. Even more remarkable than the sensation he felt during his paroxysms in his frenzy against Destrian. With one hand he clenched the letter, and with the other he dug until he could feel something wrapped in paper. He gently pulled the item, but upon entering the air, the dirtied paper unfurled, and before him fell the shimmering wooden rose. Amir's eyes glanced in the setting sun, and the sensation he looked for, being one of the most divine of all feelings, was redoubled. He raised his eyes to heaven and reveled in a most deep euphoria, allowing his mind to reform all emotions lost long ago. The gnawing past loosened its grip and fell before the supreme power of hope. At length the sun set, and the endless sea of stars stared down at the man reborn. The end. Thank you for listening. This has been Anatol Barsukov.